Max RPG Podcast. I'm in Max! Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 22, Episode 1 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kenny.
My name is Stork.
And we have special guests. They're over there.
That's not even an anagram for Chris.
No. Well done.
Podcast Vagabond. That's it. That's a t-shirt right there.
It is. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, it's been years, guys. You guys have been doing this. We've been on your show. You've been on our show. It's been what we were talking just before we came on. When did you guys start?
Wow. Crazy.
Wow, that's a little creepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you guys were one of the first out there. How has everything changed for you? Because I know we've changed our format a bit.
They can't hear the guests.
They can't hear the guests.
Can't hear the
They're
guests.
still muted?
Okay, hold on.
Right?
Right. There's no other reason for them to watch this at all.
Whoa. Woo!
So should we say horrible things about the guests then, as long as they can't hear us right now?
Sure. Yeah.
Carl's an asshole. I hate that guy.
But you guys look beautiful on camera, so that's important. You're centered and you've got a great flag. Important things.
Kimmy has a funny last name.
I do. I have a super weird last name.
We were making fun of it on our when
We were.
they were over on Fear the Boot.
Yeah. Whoa.
Sorry.
There's some awesome
They can
sounds.
hear them now.
Oh, good.
They can hear
Perfect
them?
timing, yes.
Yeah.
They can just suddenly hear us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you turn me way down
Sorry
now?
about that, Carl.
All right, they can still hear you? Yes?
Everything went way up.
That's okay.
That's okay.
But they can hear them, right?
That's it. According, yep. Let's see. You
I'll just take my headphones off. It'll be fine.
still here?
Well,
It kind of looks like you're racing when you
Let
do
me
that.
see the
You
OBS.
can see it there.
You're like the Memorex guy in the chair with your headphones back on.
Man, you're old.
I was
Yes,
going
I
to
am.
say, Chris, like that's one of those things. Even
But I am also live.
Okay.
even if you know the reference, you don't quote that. Like that 1984
Yes, Dork.
Mac commercial with the hammer.
Oh, right, yeah.
Shown only once. You know who filmed that?
No.
Yeah, wait, Ridley Scott.
Nice.
Yeah.
You guys are so alike. You're like
Yeah,
best
no,
friends.
the woman
Yeah,
who
we-
threw the hammer was some kind
He's
of
got
Olympian
gray in
or
his
something
beard.
like that.
Just, yeah.
Is that how you guys
Glasses. Look, glasses.
What?
It's like looking in a mirror.
All
I know,
right.
we're like twins.
bond? With the hair.
Yeah,
All right. Everything's good. We can continue on.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So I was talking about how you guys were like one of the first RPG podcasts out there, and this was 12 years, 10 days ago.
Yes. May 15th, 2006 was our first
You're very
episode.
informed, Stark. That's amazing that you knew that.
I remember. How have things changed since you guys started? I mean, other than this whole video thing, but that is a big deal.
Oh, well, let's see. Okay, so first of all, Dragon's Landing Inn came and went, and we have laughed atop the ashes.
And
There.
danced
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
So we
Yes.
should probably, before we get into that, we should probably do introductions again because they missed that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't hear us.
They heard us, but so why don't you guys introduce yourselves first?
Okay, so I'm Dan from the podcast Fear the Boot.
I am Chris, also occasionally from Fear the Boot, but also, I suppose I actually should list a couple of other things. Gamers Behaving Badly and Adventures of Young and Holt right now. So
Yeah,
Excellent.
which is one of the two actual plays Fear the Boot is running.
So how has your experience been with actual plays?
Chris, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll be happy to, Dan. Why, thank you. I'm finding it incredibly enjoyable in the sense that not only just from the before and after of telling a story. So you're telling it once while you're at the table. You're telling it a second time when you go and edit it, because we edit ours down a little bit, but also for the educational experience that it has been, and how it has actually improved a number of things that I do in my games when it comes to running subsequent sessions and whatnot. It's actually, it's really beneficial to my skill level, I guess, if you really want to put it in terms of like that.
The thing that I found is it forces us to actually follow our own advice.
Right?
The way that I've described Fear, because early on in Fear the Boots Run, we had these people write in and say, "Oh, you think you guys are just so perfect and you got it all figured out. You know, I'd love to see you run a game and it'd probably flop and blah." It's like, no. You got to understand, guys. Or this person didn't understand. Fear the Boot is a monument to our failures. This is not advice wrought from our vast intelligence. This is advice wrought from repeatedly running into a brick wall and then writing down on a piece of paper, "Brick walls do not give." And out of that comes what is Fear the Boot. And we have our own games fail, and when they do, it's usually because we didn't follow our own advice. But now that we're being recorded and we know that there's people paying attention to us, it's like when the boss walks into the room. You suddenly have to pay attention to what you're doing. You have to look busy.
You're talking about accountability.
Yeah. Like when your wife walks in the room, so you have to pause the video game and at least walk toward the vacuum cleaner until she's a safe distance away.
Always.
Oh, thank God you're actually playing video games when your wife walks in the room, because that's not what happens when my wife walks into the room.
But there usually still is walking towards her at that point.
The game is going surprisingly well because of the fact that we aren't tripping over ourselves. So we're actually validating our own ideas, which is something strangely unique and amazing.
You know, the scrutinizing thing is interesting too that you mentioned that, Dan, because it is a so much at what you do at the table is just made up bullshit that is stuff that you throw it away or you throw it out there at the table, and then you're thinking in your head you're never going to go back to this, but then when you read other people's analysis of what's going on there, they're picking on some of these things that, no, I had no plans for that at all. But now you start thinking in your head, maybe I should start planning for that. So it is interesting that scrutiny level. And you guys get it a lot more than we do. Well, in the sense that in the Fear the Boot Discord, I'm reading other people's, opinions and insights on Dan's game, which is very interesting to see.
I agree with you. There is a bit of a Schrodinger's cat, playing for the camera and being recorded, and it does kind of affect the way you are conscious of the fact that you are being watched, if not, and being held accountable. So there's a bit of like, once you observe that cat, it does affect the way it's going to behave after that. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm certainly conscious of it whenever I'm playing. And I think some of the GMs the same way, because it keeps you honest, it keeps you thinking. But I'm astonished at how well the APs are taken in because when we started this, I'm like, who wants to watch people play games?
Yes,
that seems
was
stupid.
our hope as well. This, to me, honestly sounded like a terrible idea. To me, RPGs have never been either a voyeuristic or exhibitionist hobby. They are something you participate in and you enjoy from that level. And maybe they're fun to watch from the sidelines for a little bit. But I think one of the things, in fact, we actually just did an episode on this. It's not been released yet. It's in our editing queue. But we just did an episode on something which is one of the things that we've learned over the years of doing this is how many people tune in because they are disconnected from the hobby they love.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's as true of your show as it is of ours, that there are people tuning in, and I'm sure you're getting emails saying, hey, I don't even have a gaming group.
Yeah.
And this is how I get my fix. And so when they hear these games, this is as close, unfortunately, as they may get to playing for whatever reason. And I'm sure some people are playing their own games and they just like the entertainment or like the story or like the table banter or whatever, but we had to strike this middle road of accepting there's an audience there, and as a result, playing up or playing down certain things, watching certain sorts of table banter and such. but at the same time, not manufacturing the product. Just accepting, look, we're going to do our thing, and this isn't a stage play.
Right.
Right.
And that's actually because I consume several actual plays. More, I think, when I actually started tallying, I kind of surprised myself. But it's a kind of almost a lazy way to listen to a story. Like when you listen to either a fiction book on tape, or if you're listening to an actual audio drama, you have to pay attention the whole time. You're going to miss a detail. And with an actual play, it's not that way. You can tune out a little bit, or you might get distracted with something at work, which is where, for me, that's where I mostly consume mine. And so I'll miss details, but because of the way the story flows, regardless of which one I'm listening to, you can pick up exactly what's happening 5 minutes later and realize you probably didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
And it flows a different way. And then there is that, what Dan had mentioned too, there's that familiarity of what happens at that gaming table, and it's nice actually, whether you're playing in a game or not.
Yeah, I mean, you end up kind of feeling like the people there are your friends, and everyone's kind of drawn to different ones. Like there's some people who really like the very carefully edited ones with sound effects and stuff, and there's people who like the more our end of the spectrum where nobody fucking touches the audio other than uploading it. Because people like different things about it, whether it's they're there for the story, or they're there to feel like they're with people that they feel like they know and get to know online. Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating thing.
And that part is actually I do find fascinating, where you have straight up raw, it's straight from the utter gaming table, to your ears. And then you get something where on what Eric over at Openly Gamer Theater does, where he does these highly edited things with music and massive amounts of sound effects and dramatic interludes, with scripted pieces in betwixt the role playing. And it's fascinating that you can get that spectrum of storytelling in there. It's pretty cool.
It does have theater in the name. There is an aspect that I finally figured out about APs, because I was like, why do you want to watch people play a game? It seems really selfish and masturbatory, and why would you do that? But there is an upshot for me, and it's when you are GMing or when you're playing, you tend to play in an isolated group, and you don't get exposed to a lot of different styles and such. And so when you're watching these APs, you're watching multiple GMs tackle different problems in different styles in different ways and different things. And I've learned more watching APs about GMing and different ways to solve a similar problem than I ever have in my own groups, because you can't create in a vacuum. And so watching these APs and watching people, how they deal with wandering damage, which was a nightmare story we had written in, or whatever it is a breath of fresh air. And so, if nothing else, it's like watching a play. You're watching a version of a play that you've seen before, but it's with different actors and different things, and they're taking a different take on it. And I've learned more by watching APs than I ever have by playing in the game with my friends. Does that make sense?
I thought it would. Yeah, and
makes perfect sense.
And I thought it would be a much bigger minority or much smaller minority of listeners. I figured that sort of thing would get some kind of traction, but I did not think it would be as broadly received as it is.
Yeah.
The AP does get less listens than our regular show does, but it still does get a sizable number of people tuning into it every week, which endlessly baffles me. I mean, I expected somebody to consume it because people have asked for it, but I never expected to see the numbers, the way they are.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating too with you look at the number of AP podcasts that are out there. I think there's double or triple the number of APs than there are advice shows now, which is something that's really changed. It used to be the other way. Everybody had a podcast about, hey, let's give you advice on how to game. And now you look and it's just pages of actual plays of all different types, of all different people, all different styles. And it's just amazing. Hundreds.
Well, something that ties into that I don't get, and this may just be I'm wired differently, it may be a generational thing, I don't know what it is I love to play video games. I play a lot of video games. I don't get Twitch. The idea that I get it insofar as I'm going to tune in because maybe there's a Twitch streamer who's really funny. It's not about the game, but they're just a hilarious commentator.
Right.
Somebody like Video Game Donkey. I think he is freaking hilarious.
Yes.
Or you might get somebody who you're trying to see if you even want to play this game. Watch 5 minutes, 10 minutes of gameplay to see if you even want it.
Mm-hmm.
But these people that just religiously follow folks who bounce from one game to the next and really don't do a whole lot, but straight playthroughs with minimal commentary.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, I just plain do not understand what the attraction is. But holy crap, these people just knock down enormous numbers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it baffles me. I mean, I don't understand why. I need somebody who consumes it who's, well, other than, like, I don't know, like my nephews are kind of into this, but they're also really young. I need someone who's old enough to understand their own psyche. Someone who's like 25 plus, who's into this, to sit down and explain it to me.
I think you're overthinking it here. It's the equivalent of watching porn and having actual sex. It is really entertaining to just watch porn. You can watch it all day long. And having actual sex it takes a lot of work.
Okay, so since this show's apparently more or less underrated, look, when I'm having sex, I like looking at tits. When I'm watching porn, I'm still looking at tits. Okay, so there are still some parallels, even if I'm not directly involved in the act.
Yes.
And in a video game, I've never been like, wow, look at that roll I just did. You know, it's the fun. It's doing it. You know, it's experience. And it's wow. Watch somebody else make choices for me. I mean, that's the DMV. That's not a fun afternoon.
I think part of it is, like you said, the personality. I don't know. Like, I guess I love watching like other cosplayers make costumes, and which is super boring to most people, like watching someone sew something. But to me, that's really interesting because I know the intricacies of sewing something. So I think there's also that familiarity. People like watching video games that they've played a ton. Like I like watching people play World of Warcraft. Like if I can't play, I would rather play myself. But if I can't, then okay, watch people play WoW. Oh, hey, I remember when I did that quest. Something like that.
Methadone.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, and I think actually you hit on something there that I think has a lot to do with the APs. Is that and comparing this to an audiobook, you don't necessarily know the outcome of a story. With a lot of fiction, you can pretty much guess how a certain story is going to proceed. But like today, I was consuming an AP while I was at work, and I realized after it was over, I expected the heroes to come out on top. That is not what happened. They all died, except for like one who got away.
Right.
And when it came time for that clutch roll that you have at the table that the player had to make, he didn't make it.
Right.
He didn't make it. He didn't have any more rerolls. It was over. The bad guy won.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that story. And I thought, I totally did not expect an ending, and I kind of appreciated that ending because it gave me something different. And so there is that unpredictability, I think, there too, that makes that kind of enjoyable to see, because you get invested in what's going on with those dice rolls or how the characters are interacting with that encounter. And so it becomes something that isn't necessarily predictable. But yet has to do with what you're saying, like you like those intricacies of being able to watch the details and see how people craft that other stuff. Yeah. And it's kind of the same way.
I would love to know, and I have no way of ever finding out this information, but I would love to know what the overlap is between the two shows. Because, I mean, to me, I hate to use this buzzword, but there is a sort of synergy between the advice show and the AP.
Yeah.
Because we give the advice, we execute it on the AP, then the AP raises new ideas, which in turn drives what we talk about on the advice show.
It's called a feedback loop.
Yeah, and it is. It's a feedback loop. And so I'm curious how many people consume the AP as a direct result of that relationship between the shows. So I'm sure that it's most people listen to the AP, listen to Fear the Boot, because that's probably how they found the AP.
Yeah.
But I am curious, like, do we have a significant percentage of people who only listen to the AP and don't give two craps about the advice show?
Yeah. I know that we have a lot of people who found us through the APs, and some of them have gone on to listen to the actual podcast. I mean, obviously, the main podcast, this show, has many more viewers and listeners.
About 3 times.
Yeah. So a lot more, but we also have crap load of APs every week. We've got generally 3 games a week that are going out. So there's also, people tune into specific systems. But we've had people, like Erica Odd is in the chat room right now, who found us through our Savage World game that we're running, our Rift Savage World game. She found us through that, and now she's hanging out and part of this podcast.
Yeah.
So.
And she actually found us on YouTube.
Yeah, she found us on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, very fun.
Through the APs.
Hi, Erica.
Let me go. I'm going to go through the stuff now.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, it's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been doing this a long time. It's really neat to see the evolution of podcasts. So, thanks for letting me.
Which we didn't talk about.
No, we didn't.
We can talk about it after we do the blurb. Do the blurb.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
all
first
right.
off, in this episode, not only are we going to talk about podcasting, we're going to discuss adapting existing canon to an RPG. And Fredericks writes in about murder hobos and the exploitation of NPCs. And Ollie sends us the riddle from his first gaming experience. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We're on all of the social medias. We're on the Twitter.
Yep.
We're on the Facebag.
Yeah.
And we're on the Instagram, happyjacksrpg, all one word.
Yes.
And if you'd like to watch the show live, we do the show at Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, happyjacks.7 p.m. Pacific-ish time.
Yeah.
Just Google happyjacks.com. You'll find us.
Org. Happyjacks.org.
Happyjacks.org.
I'm sorry. If you Google
Happyjacks.com.
happyjacks.com, it'll take you to happyjacks.org.
It'll
No, it
take you
won't.
to some bastard who got the name before I
Yeah.
did.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I have org.
It's been 9 years, Stork. 9 years. You don't know where we live on the internet yet.
I've actually owned happyjacks.org since the 90s.
Oh,
It used to be Happy Jacks GURPS resources
that's cute.
in the old days.
I didn't know that.
You can go on archive.org and find the old webpage.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to.
And
Don't go
if-
to archive.com because some bastard bought it and
That's
sitting
right. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can go to happyjacks.org/live and watch it there, 7 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Oh, someone
All right.
did buy happyjacks.com.
Yeah. Oh, it's
It's a
been.
cigar shop.
I think it was back then
Bastards.
too. I think it was back then too. Now you can go to happyjacksrpg.com and it will redirect you to happyjacks.org.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to do something passive-aggressive or maybe aggressive-aggressive.
You're going to buy it from the cigar shop?
I'm going to put a back order on that domain, so
God
if they fail
damn.
to renew it, it'll become under my control. And I'll send it back to you at an enormous markup.
Excellent.
No, that's aggressive. There's no passive in there. Because the fact that you're telling us, too, is, that's
I
just...
came very close. During the handoff between Fast and Fan Pro and eventually Catalyst.
Yeah.
I came very close to actually owning BattleTech.com.
That's amazing.
Ooh.
Nice.
You'd be a rich man today.
No, I wouldn't have said that. I absolutely used it. That's the thing is you're not a cyber squatter if you're actually using it for a relevant purpose.
Fair enough.
I'm a sufficient BattleTech fan that I would have used it
Yeah.
for a sufficiently relevant purpose.
Yes. All right. So, podcasting. You want to talk about podcasting?
No. I think we got it out of our system here, didn't we?
All right.
Well, okay. So, what has changed in podcasting since you guys started? Because I know that with us, really, it's the video and how many people have been listening. Because
That's
it
only
used to
been
be a
like the
really
last
small
2
world,
years, though.
and now
It
it's
still is a small world.
it's pretty
I
big.
think
It's bigger.
YouTube's making it bigger.
Yeah.
But it still is a small world. I walk down the street, nobody knows who I am. I walk down the halls of Gen Con, it's a very different story. Or more appropriately, I talk to somebody.
Yeah.
walking
Yes.
down the- and
You have a very
I tell-
distinctive voice.
And does it creep you guys out that when you meet people, because there's been this monodirectional communication going on for years, they know you and you don't know them?
Yes. Well,
Kind of used to it now.
Yeah, we're
kind of.
because of the band that Stu and I are in. That happens a lot. It actually happens on the streets for this niche band that we're in. But it's not as big a shock, I guess, to me as it was maybe to you. Was it a shock enough to you? Because there's a story we have about Dave and Rob meeting us, and they recognized our voices before they
Yeah.
saw our faces.
They were at fair and heard us talking. Like,
Right.
I think those are the Happy Jacks guys.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if it creeps me out. At first it kind of did. Now it doesn't really. When I went to Gen Con last year for the first time ever, and we had a meetup at a bar that was like about a mile and a half from the convention center, and there was like 15 people there, and it was just Bill and I and all these people that neither of us knew, but we all had a lot. They obviously knew me very, very well. Mm-hmm. And I would sit at one end of the table and talk with like 4 or 5 guys for a while, and then Bill would come over and says, "The guys on the other end of the table want to talk to you. You need to go over there." Like, okay,
Really?
That was weird. That was really weird.
Holding court.
Kind of, but I mean, no, drinking and holding court at the same time.
Like you do.
Well, yeah, but it was
As one does.
it was fun, and I had a lot of people come up to me because we'd already been streaming for a while when I went to Gen Con.
Yeah.
So I had some people come up and recognize me from either the Twitch stream or from the YouTube videos too, which
Yeah.
was, I mean,
I think "creep me out" is probably too strong of a phrase. It's unusual.
It depends on the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. Well, okay, maybe Kimmy experiences this from an angle I don't, because
She does.
I've never had anyone come up and hit on me.
I do.
Yeah, I have no doubt. Believe me, I have no doubt. But I have never had anyone come up and hit on me. At least not that I was aware of. Maybe I'm so oblivious. I don't know.
Maybe.
But when we started doing this, we didn't think it was that big of a thing, because it wasn't. I mean, 2006 podcasting only existed for like 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the technology was relatively new. We assumed that probably not that many people were going to consume this. We were just doing this mostly for our entertainment. And when we started seeing download numbers that we couldn't account for, even between us and our moms, then it was like, okay, this is a thing.
Yeah.
And then you sort of hit that level of big fish in a small pond. It's a very small pond. I mean, we're not PewDiePie or something. I have no delusions of that.
Don't be that.
Much less an A-list celebrity. I'm not Robert Downey Jr.
No. This is a very niche market for sure.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
Robert Downey Jr.
Once
See,
again,
he
walk
is the
down
stork
the
of the
street,
podcast.
nobody knows your name. Walk through Gen Con, and it's a different story. And I think we never really were prepared to be recognized. For somebody to walk up to us and say, "I know who you are, and I know these facts about you, and I have invested myself in the things that you say about this hobby and about your life." I mean, it's not just humbling. It's like it puts you kind of on your off foot. It's like you don't know how to respond to it. I don't mean that in a bad way, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't approach such conventions.
No.
I try to be a very approachable person, but it's just nothing in life prepares you for that. And I'm not sufficiently arrogant, and I'm patting myself on the back here, but I'm not sufficiently arrogant to entirely just fall into that, to be like, oh yeah, well of course I deserve this attention. It's just more like, who the hell am I?
Well, what you're describing there, I mean, I work in Hollywood, and what you're describing there is fame. That's what famous people deal with all the time, right? We just have a little taste of it, just a tiny little taste of it. I mean, imagine that you are so famous, your face is so famous, you go into a shopping center to buy bananas, and people want to come up and talk to you, and they talk to you about the most intimate things, and it really is not off-putting, but very, it is a bit, just a bit. It's like you have me at a disadvantage. I have no idea who you are, and yet you know who I'm married to and where I live. Wow. What you're saying is the sort of the curse, the downside of fame. Now, we're not famous, well, maybe in a small, tiny niche way.
I like to say we're the minnows in the puddle.
There we go. But you're right. If you're not prepared for it, I mean, and who is? We're doing this podcast. We just sit here in a room, we drink beer, and this stuff goes out into the void, and we don't think anything of it after the podcast is over.
Yeah. It's people think I'm extroverted. I'm not. I'm incredibly introverted, maybe ambiverted at best. But I appear, because to me, when I do the podcast, I'm not talking to n number of people. I'm talking to my friends in a room.
Yeah.
That's all I see. I mean, I am aware of the fact that other people will hear it, and so I curb certain parts of my language and personality and such to avoid being inflammatory. But I'm talking to my friends. That's all I see. But in terms of what things have changed, I think the two biggest things I would point to is one is technology. And I don't just mean that in terms of video. When we got started, things like we've got people dialing in with modems to download these shows.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
We had to put on our original business cards because this was a huge thing in 2006. We have a podcast, and you don't need an iPod to listen.
Oh yeah.
because that was a huge thing. I mean, 12 years ago, you walk up to somebody and say, I have a podcast. They say, oh, I'd love to check it out, but I don't own an iPod.
Yeah.
And there's some debate as to exactly where the term podcast came from and did it have anything to do with the iPod or not. But the idea that it was a generic MP3 file they could consume anywhere, you had to educate people on this. They didn't know these things. And so the technology changed. You know, these aggregators, podcatchers, and the availability of broadband internet and how many people have it and such, you know, that changed quite a bit.
Even the fact that there's systems out there to just cater to podcasts is astonishing now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, too, I just think how it's funny. Well, you know, since we've been doing it, you know, we know what the medium does and what it has and what it's capable of doing and how good it is, you know, as a media and a medium to consume. But when you see it really start to catch on now, as it has, like in the last couple of years, when you have people talking about certain podcast shows, I mean, even outside of our niche, that are shows to listen to, and how some of these catch fire, how some of these are now being turned into television shows because of how popular they've become. And you see news stories on them. I remember when I was listening to, what was the Richard Simmons podcast that was like, it was just around briefly last year. It was like a mini series, but it was something like searching for Richard Simmons or whatever, because he was a shut-in.
Yeah.
Fascinating podcast to listen to. Then after I was listening to it, I started seeing news stories about this, you know, on network television talking about this show. And that never would have happened, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. It would have been talking about podcasts as like this novelty thing, not as this mainstream thing. Here's this groundbreaking podcast that's talking about topic X.
You know what's been kind of funny, too, is I don't think we totally ever understand the impression or the impact we have, for good or ill. Well, let me give you an example, because Chris, this kind of ties into what you were just talking about. So Fear the Con, of course, is coming up here in mid-June. Yeah. And
hey, plug it, though. Where can they find info about that?
FearTheCon.com.
There you go.
And if you click on the registration link, that will take you to where you sign up and everything. And so, yeah, FearTheCon.com. It's going to be in Brentwood, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis, June 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, which is a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Social Mixer on Thursday, Con on Friday and Saturday.
See, they build in times to meet and greet. That's a really awesome social mixer. That's
huge
smart.
I tell you right now, it changes the entire convention. Having people socially break the ice before they're gaming together completely changes the convention, because when you walk into the game hall the next day, people aren't strangers. You know them.
They might be hungover, but they're not strangers.
Sure.
Will be.
But you're probably both hungover and have a story to tell.
Yes.
You know, it's completely changes the social dynamic. I could fill your entire show probably talking about stuff like that. But we just had somebody from, oh my gosh, it was like, okay, so we have a Patreon. I'm going to talk about that in a second, 'cause that's been a huge change in podcasting.
Yeah.
But with Patreon, we use that money primarily, almost all of it goes to paying an audio engineer that does our sound balancing and editing and a bunch of work on the show that I just honestly don't have the time to do. And she got contacted by someone who's going to be at Fear the Con, who just so happens to work on the podcast for, it's either NPR or PRI, I forget which. But let's just say it's something that has a few zeros more than Fear the Boot does in download. And they're like, man, I'd really love to get together with you and compare notes on editing and pick your brain for some tips and tricks. And it's like, who are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're the proving ground there, right? Because, you know, consistently for how many? 12 years?
12 years, 10 days.
12 years, 10 days.
Something we came to find out we didn't know. Because, by the way, most fan efforts, I've been told, by people that are in the RPG industry, most fan efforts, fan blogs, fan games, whatever, will typically last 12 to 24 months. If you outlast that by any stretch of time, you are already breaking the odds. To go 12 years or I mean anything, even if you're not at the 12-year mark, if you've been going 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever, you are way above and beyond.
Yeah.
Most marriages don't last that long.
That's true.
No, they
Very
don't.
true.
Yeah, 7 years.
Oh my
It's
God.
like real thing.
Been talking with you guys about RPGs a lot longer than most people have been married.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, that is an unfortunate statement on a
strange.
whole lot of things.
strange revelation right there. I'm gonna drink.
Marry a role player. I think that's my best advice. At least you'll always have a podcast to listen to or something.
No. Yeah, the trick is to marry someone who does amazing graphics for your podcast.
Right.
Beautiful video.
Well, that
be-
or my alternate hypothesis is something that I saw float around social media, which is that every healthy marriage consists of two people. Someone who hates pickles and someone who will eat that pickle. That is the secret to a well-balanced
That's not a
marriage.
euphemism, is it?
Yes.
I think
No,
it is.
no, it's not.
I choose to think it is.
Okay.
Like you go someplace, you get a grilled cheese, which for some reason a grilled cheese is inexplicably always served with a pickle. That the person who ordered the grilled cheese will never eat. You need someone across from you who will eat that pickle. That is a sign you have found your soulmate.
Jack Spratt could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And so,
That's right.
twixt them both. They
I
look
still
butter
think
clean.
I still vote it's a euphemism. It's still a euphemism.
I think it's a euphemism.
Yeah.
What are you drinking? What are these tiny little cans?
I got a limited edition mini pack for my birthday. They're sample packs
Look at
of,
these little teensy
Yeah.
little cans.
They're
because
like-
I can then pretend like I'm drinking 4 and get fewer carbs.
Oh, it's cider.
Yeah, they're Strongbow did these little limited edition packs. I got them for my birthday.
It's a flight.
Yeah, it's basically a flight, and they're flavors that they don't make yet. They're trying to see which ones they want to make next.
Got
so
it.
it's like a sample pack, and I'm through 3 of 4 right now.
Yeah. Here you got cherry beet.
It's
That's,
blossom.
Yeah,
Cherry
I mean,
beet?
No, it's cherry
Blossom.
Oh.
Was that funny?
Cherry
think it's
beet?
It was the absurd non sequitur.
Okay.
All right.
Cherry Beat sounds like some sort of Korean pop band.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a K-pop.
K-pop. Yep.
Oh my god. I'm writing it.
Well, anyway,
Someone get that URL.
we at some point we really should all get together and just do a whole podcast about podcasting.
Yeah.
Yes, I got a lot.
I do.
more to say.
No, we do
Hashtag
too.
Inception.
I
do
think
too.
one of the biggest things that's changed, and I'm probably the only one who really noticed this, was like all the different kinds of people who are in it. Like I remember when we started 9 years ago. Like I was one of the only women. Like we had like 2 or 3 girls who
Very
kind of
true.
rotated in.
It's very true.
And it's amazing now I'm on a couple different discords of RPG podcasters with like hundreds of people, which is like there's hundreds of shows out there now, thousands of shows. And just the number of
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thou-
RPG,
yes.
not that many, but
no,
yeah, there's a lot of
specifically
podcasts.
about RPGs.
After this is over, let's pencil in a time and we can do a series on talking about podcasting because you know
That'd be
what? This is
amazing.
actually really amazing, and this stuff is really kind of fascinating. I find it interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe other people will too, but this
there's
a lot to say about this, and maybe we could all put our heads together. and This might be really great. But
We'll start a new
I'm gonna tell
podcast.
you 2 stories.
to do.
and
No,
I'll-
I'm
then
going to
I'll
finish my thing
put
about
this
women.
one
It's
down.
important.
Sorry. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Don't cut me off. Just kidding.
I'm
No,
cutting-
but I think that's one of the coolest things because I really do feel, and I've had a lot of people, and you're talking about people approaching you. One of the things that has meant the most to me, I've had a lot of women and approach me and say, hey, you know, I started playing RPGs because my husband was listening to Happy Jacks and I heard you were playing. And suddenly it became this thing where I realized I could play too. Or, hey, I was listening to RPG podcasts because I wasn't brave enough to get into a game. And then I realized, hey, this is a thing for women too. And I think that's something that, you know, all the old school podcasts, it made it accessible for people who were afraid to walk into their friendly local gaming store and just join a game. Suddenly they were able to listen to gaming advice. They were able to access the hobby in a way that was safe and comfortable for them, which then eventually built, I think, majorly built to all these people accessing the hobby and eventually being brave enough to actually join in the fun. So I think, like all the stuff we did years ago, I think really, really matters. And I think we've really added to the hobby in a lot of ways that we never predicted or even thought about.
We just need to convince them that there's games other than Apocalypse World Hacks.
There are? No, there are.
it's just the flavor
It's
of
the
the
new.
month.
It's the new hotness.
Yeah.
I know.
For a while, it was Savage World.
We're running what 3 games or 4 games right now, right?
I think 4 games right now.
4 games right now. Half of them are Apocalypse World hacks.
2.
And on the forum, people have said, "You guys should do more Apocalypse World hacks."
Yes.
How many more do they want?
This
You're
is why I-
dealing with addicts.
Yes.
These aren't.
Don't
aren't
give
helping.
what they want.
All right. Oh, did you want to tell your?
Actually, that is actually very cool, Kimmy. What you're saying. Whether it's, and I guess it doesn't really matter who it draws in,
Right.
as long as it draws in people. And I think that we can circle that back around to the original topic of APs, where I think that can also then be a gateway drug in a certain sense for people who maybe don't necessarily quote unquote know how to play, which is bullshit, but still they have that own personal block in your path to helping you get a game going. Seeing other people's APs can, prevent that from happening and actually allow you to say, oh, well, we'll try and emulate them, and then they go on and develop their own style after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. It's so nice to have you guys here.
RPG topic.
Oh,
I wanted to talk about, this was actually requested from the forum.
okay.
Adapting existing canon to an RPG.
Ooh.
And how you go about finding a place to put your campaign within an existing canon. Star Wars would come to mind. Where are you going to put it? And I mean, there's a lot of people who really don't care about canon. They just want to have their story and tell their story, and that's fine. But there are other people, they don't want to interfere with existing canon.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I kind of wanted to talk about how, like in the past, when you've run games or been in games, what has worked well and what hasn't worked well to try to find a place for your campaign within the canon, and whether or not you worry about whether you're disrupting the timeline of the movies or whatever it is. And this actually originally came up because of I'm working on a short campaign for Starship Troopers, the book, not the horrible film by Paul Verhoeven. I curse his name.
Okay. It's not horrible. Those bug animation still holds up. They still look really good.
It does hold up. There's no, well, I'm on
Plus,
record.
it's Doogie Howser, so.
And I didn't mind him.
And co-ed shower scenes.
I didn't mind that either. I minded that there wasn't powered armor.
Yes.
So hot.
Which is what in a major part of it. I minded that it was they took Heinlein's work and basically turned it into a parody.
Yes.
There was zero respect for the work. Imagine if someone had done that to Lord of the Rings. Imagine if someone had done that to Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And how many people would be like,
Right. The
But-
Dermot Strand. Yeah, you're right.
But I went through. I've probably read that book more than a dozen times now, and I just read through it again recently, and I was paying very close attention to the detail of the background of the world in it, and there's very little. You only get little tiny glimpses and pieces of it, and I was able to come up with about like 5 one-session story ideas. Like one-shots to string together a sort of campaign.
It's a lot because it's not a very big book.
No, it's not. It's probably a couple hundred pages.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
a
a
quick
lot.
read. It's a quick read.
Yeah.
But I was able to come up with that all remain consistent within the novel and the stuff that happens in the book, or at least that is mentioned in the book. So you could run some kind of story. Now, obviously there's no timeline. I mean, there's a sort of timeline that happens within it, but you were talking about these two, galaxy-spanning civilizations. So there's a lot of other things going on in different places. So there was actually a lot of space in that. But what do you guys think, as far as using existing canon? And do you care if you're interfering with existing canon? And if you do, how do you try to frame your game so that it keeps that separate?
When you're talking about canon, you're talking about just world setting. It could be.
I'm talking about history.
Hyboria. It could be Robert E. Howard Hyboria. It could be an existing campaign that maybe somebody else has run. It could be a film series genre or something. So, okay,
Yeah.
So it's all of that. Okay.
I'm going to lead off with a pretty hard.
Turn the mic off. I gotta get you the mic.
I did. It is off.
Stu, why don't you have your camera on?
My camera is on. It's just they can only
see it through the Twitch.
Yeah, he's on the stream. I'm
unplug
seeing.
that
So
mic.
you can see it on Twitch. Okay. So
Yeah.
is anyone commenting on Twitch? Like, do we have
Here.
Yes.
chats
Oh,
to
yeah.
respond to? Well, let's respond. Can we respond to some chats? I hate to take control of your show, but I just did.
Hey, Ben
Sure,
Parker,
do the
what's up?
thing.
Better. Okay.
I fixed it.
We have to read the chats to him though.
Oh no, there's a lot happening in the chat. That's the thing you're gonna have to like.
They very rarely talk about what we talk about.
Yeah.
But sometimes
There's
they
a
do.
little bit. Yeah, I bring it up if they're a little bit off topic right now.
Just pick a random one that's relevant. We have to acknowledge these people.
Heavy Metal Jess says, "What not to do? Run anything Lovecraftian. Say female heroes aren't canon."
We love Heavy Metal Jess. She's been around as long as we have.
She inspired me to put pins on this jacket, by the way. It's just for Jess.
Yes,
Canon,
you're
however,
still rocking
that
it.
Cthulhu got killed. So he got nuked,
Yeah.
literally.
100%.
But yeah, because H.P. Lovecraft actually had an open source world. He allowed other people to write in it and invited them too.
Yeah.
And in a follow up to Call of Cthulhu, there was an atomic bomb dropped on Cthulhu that killed him.
Oh,
and
no
also,
kidding.
it's not pronounced Cthulhu; it's pronounced Lolu. Look that one up. It's true.
No kidding.
Anyway,
amazing.
so
He's amazing.
there you go,
He's
Heavy
making
Metal
this up.
Jess. There's your unsolicited.
You know what is interesting though. I know that those pulp writers did share information back and forth. So when you read Robert E. Howard from the same era, they share a similar kind of feel in a genre. I mean, certainly there were unspeakable horrors and bowls in Robert E. Howard's that were very similar to H.P. Lovecraft.
one of which was even named Yogg.
There you go. So they did talk. And
So Canon, I'm going to start off with a pretty bold statement,
Do it.
which is, first of all, if you're running a game, you need to accept first and foremost that this is not a story about the canon. This is a story about the player characters.
Mm-hmm.
They have come to this game because they have a character they're invested in, and they want to explore that story. If what you want to do is, first and foremost, tell the story of the canon, call off the game, pop some popcorn, and put it in the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hold to that. Now, I think there are lanes of the highway you can pick. There are gradations you can work within that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you cannot accept that initial premise of this is not a story about Luke Skywalker, this is a story about the character somebody else made for this game, then you've missed the point of a role-playing game.
right. I can remember when we ran a game of Stormbringer, back when the original Stormbringer first came out, and we decided to just sort of have it happen at the same time Elric was walking around. Now, the player characters never met Elric, but all of that baggage that from all those books was still there. But the world is so rich that they could be somewhere else while Elric was off, destroying the world somewhere else, and those ripples might happen, these stories might be told, but there's so much to do. Rather, you don't always have to intersect with the main characters of the movie or the books. If it's a rich world, if it's Star Wars, if it's Melibone, if it's Robert E. Howard's Hyboria, there's so many other sandboxes in that world to play in that you never actually have to encounter Conan. You never have to encounter Skywalker. You can know that they're there. There might be tales that are told. There might be villages and stuff, but that shouldn't prohibit you or even make you want to interact with those characters. If I'm playing a Star Wars game, I really don't want to meet Darth Vader. It's gonna bring in so much baggage into that game that I don't want to have to deal with. I just want to play my little Twi'lek bounty hunter,
Of course.
and not have to deal with the rest of that canon.
Yeah, and that's one strategy, is simply play around the canon. Play outside of it. If you're playing Star Wars, you play somebody that's in the fringe. You play somebody that's just not encountering all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It could still be happening. You're not interacting with it directly.
Right.
Well, one of the things I did when I ran the FFG Star Wars campaign is I put I placed it. This is before Force Awakens came out, and I placed it like a year after episode. What is it? 6? Episode 6. So the Empire's the Emperor's dead, but the people running his bureaucrats running it are just creating videos of him and denying the fact that he's dead.
Right.
And the Empire is
That's
slowly
cool.
collapsing.
No, that's cool.
And there's all of these Moffs and Grand Moffs who are sort of creating their own fiefdoms. So there's a lot of interesting things happening because that's actually a really interesting period if you think about it, because it's not this galaxy spanning empire is going to take probably a decade to finally completely collapse.
Like
Yeah.
Rome, yeah.
Right, it's going to take a long time. So there's a lot of chaos going on. There's a lot of bad guys who hate each other and who hate you. And I mean, I just moved it out of the timeline of the series to give the player characters some space where, you can be not only can you be the heroes, but you can be the world-changing heroes.
Yeah.
Just like they were in the movies. That's happened. Here's the chaos that results from what they did.
And depending on how big that world is, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, you're struggling with Heinlein because that particular book doesn't give you a lot of that world.
It does
but
not.
Star Wars and Expanse or any other, or Robert D. Howard.
Star Wars, especially if you
huge amounts of resources.
include the novels in it. Oh my God, it's vast!
It's huge amounts of resources.
Yeah.
So you have so many. You have so many places to play in that world without affecting any of the canon, without directly affecting any of the canon. Right. That it's not really it's a non-starter. You know?
Right. I interrupted Chris. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I used to have a really big problem with it back in the early days of gaming, and I'm gonna pick on BattleTech a little bit here, just because that was, out of any game that I played that had an established universe or a universe that continued to evolve and change, for me that was also BattleTech.
It's a good example. No, you're right.
And it was very important to me, or at least at the time I felt it was very important to me, that whatever I'm doing either run parallel to what's happening in the universe canon, or somehow be tied in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I could put it over in a different corner of the universe, just like you guys were talking about, and then play my game how I wanted to play it, but yet still those events that might be going on within the game universe still happened. And for me as a player and as a GM, I felt if I didn't do that, I wasn't delivering the game like I should to my players. And so it took me a while to kind of get out of that mentality and realize a lot about, going back to what Dan's original point was, is that you can have that up to a point, but then from the point that you start that game, then you're telling something different, and everything can proceed different from that point forward. And so it did it. It kind of took me a while to really kind of either come to that realization, or more, I guess it'd be more accurate to say, be comfortable with that realization.
And I was going to say, sometimes that canon's a safety net, because somebody's done a lot of that work for you and it's there. Why not honor it? Why not use it? But at some point, the players are going to make their own choices. It's gonna spin out a canon, and it's easier to just let it happen than try to stay on that. I was thinking of Traveller. Traveller has this vast history that they've written.
Vast.
And if you really want to, you can stick it in a certain time and space between certain planets with certain interactions that are going on and try to stick with it. But I've never had success with it, because eventually your players kill somebody important.
Exactly.
Something happens. Yeah.
You have a very heavy decision to make of what happens when your players encounter the canon and don't kowtow to it.
Right.
And that could be in the form of somebody shoots Mon Mothma, who doesn't have the ability to force deflect it. That could be, maybe they simply make what is otherwise a completely compelling and convincing RP scene by which they talk somebody out of the course they're following. Right. They convince Saruman that Sauron is not going to work out, and he needs to find, some third way to this. And
all it takes is somebody with a randomizer that rolled a 20 or a 1.
Exactly. or it's just a damn good role player to create a scene. And you have to decide, which do you love more? The story that you are telling and the players that are playing it, or the canon that was created by somebody else? Another suggestion, though, that I would have, and this is the one that I've tended to use rather than avoiding the canon, is the canon only exists to a point. Get it and quit it. So if I'm playing, let's say, Forgotten Realms, the canon exists up to the point that the game starts. And after that, from that moment forward, anything is fair game. There is nothing that is sacred. There is nothing that can't be changed. Now, I mean, certainly, that doesn't mean I'm going to bend plausibility. You can't walk up to Elminster and right hook him once and suddenly there's no repercussions and he's dead and whatever. I mean, yes, there's going to be a consistency to the canon, and yes, there are forces out there that are more powerful than the players. I mean, that's any story. But they are free. They have the agency, if they want it, to at least attempt to change the direction of canon.
Yeah.
Which I think actually is a cool thing when you think about it. If you're going to have, there were some comments in the chat earlier about, never meeting Darth Vader.
It's addicting, right?
Never meet heroes. But being able to do that, to interact with those larger-than-life people in that universe, change things around, can actually make your game a lot of fun in many ways, and create some really cool, memorable moments. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I agree, especially, going back to Star Wars, because it's such an obvious example. Different from Stork, I would love to have Darth Vader in there. I have no interest in meeting, Luke or any of them. I don't want other heroes in my game. I want to be the hero, but I totally will take on the badass bad guy that they couldn't handle for a long time. That's super fun. That's exciting to kind of, change things up a bit, I think.
Well, and I think you also have to look at not just the importance of the player characters, but the player's disposition as well, because they may not care. I mean, you may have read this book, whatever it is, and I mean, let's say something that's rather more obscure than Star Wars. This is something you read this book, you want to run this game, and you want it to play out exactly as it did in the book. But the fact is, your players really don't care.
Right.
They're invested in the characters they made and the story that they want to tell,
Yeah.
and the agency they want to believe they have. They're just not as into the property as you are. And if that's what you're trying to do, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think you need to be thinking along the lines of either just reconsuming the media or writing your own fan fiction.
Yeah, fanfic, totally.
Don't try to draw 5 other people into this follow the leader stomp through your idealized playground.
Right.
I think as a GM as well, from the GM's point of view, rather than just the players, you run the risk of railroading your players to fit this canon thing that happened. So if your players do run up into Darth Vader and they challenge him to a duel, and you're playing between episodes 1 and 2, or 5 and 6, you run the risk of they can't actually kill Darth Vader, or if they do kill Darth Vader, you have to come up with a way for him to still be around for the events of episode. So I think by sticking to the canon as a GM, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you are putting yourself in this box that the players are not going to stay in, and you have to try to keep them in, if that's what you're trying to accomplish. And I don't think that that's fair for anybody.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's best just not to have them meet Darth Vader.
Yes.
Keep him as far away from the player's characters as he possibly can. If you don't want him to get killed.
Just kill him. Just kill him. Let me kill him. I want to kill him.
Just show him the end scene in Rogue One and say, do you want this to be your party? Because this is how you get your party.
Well, except your party might have somebody in there who's a Jedi or some other form of Force user or a really high-end bounty hunter who actually could take him.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Well, you just stand on the higher ground and you take out Anakin. It's easy.
Yeah, exactly.
The fuck?
All you gotta do is put a box down.
Yeah.
Just get the higher.
And he's completely crippled.
Yeah. So just put a peach crate down.
Yeah. That's all you have to do. I guarantee you that would happen in my game.
And gets in everywhere.
Yep.
You know, a game, and it wasn't a role-playing game, but a game that I think did a good job, we'll keep hammering on Star Wars here, but it did a good job of doing this, was the TIE Fighter and X-Wing series of games.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm talking about the video games here from, I think it was the 1990s, where what they did was they told stories from the perspective of the pilots of the X-Wings, A-Wings, Y-Wings, TIE Fighters, TIE Interceptors, whatever, that were there during those events, but were not necessarily entangled in the canon proper. So, like, for example, you might play a role in trying to help the escape from Hoth, or to track down somebody who's trying to defect to the rebels. And these are things that tie into the canon, but you were never intersecting with the canon so heavily that you could derail it. You know, if Darth Vader was there, he was just on his Superstar Destroyer kind of passing by. and might make some comments or whatever, but it wasn't like you were going to shoot him down.
Yeah.
You know, when Wizards had the Star Wars license, that was how they advertised the game, the Star Wars game. They would show a canon picture from the universe. So, like, visualize this scene from Episode 6, when the Emperor is walking down after he showed up on the Death Star, and you got these rows of stormtroopers as he's walking by. Their ads were, "What's this guy's story?" And it would point to, like, the 5th stormtrooper in the 3rd row back. And so that was how they were trying to promote the game, that you could go and tell these other people's stories within that same game universe and have all this other stuff just kind of happening, but you get to detail what those things were, which actually was, kind of clever in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think that's the way to handle canon, which is to acknowledge that world is going on because you're playing in that sandbox. But and it can affect the characters in that, wow, did you hear that big Star Destroyer or the Death Star that they made got blown up? Oh my God, that's astonishing. Well, it really doesn't affect us because I still got this deal I got to make with the bounty hunters. So they know what's going on. It's happening, but it's not. Oh, that sucks. Boy, can you imagine all the contractors? That's a real bummer. Hey, maybe we can exploit that, right? But it doesn't. It's not like, they're on the Death Star and have to escape it.
Yeah.
I think that's the safe way to play that.
We talked about departing laterally from canon. So, you're in Star Wars, but you play in the fringe, or you play something else that just doesn't intersect with canon. But I think you can also depart from canon horizontal, or vertically, rather, where I realize this may eventually interfere with new canon as it gets created, but if you want to write your own canon, pick up at the end of where the movies have gone so far, and say, okay, or something they don't cover, a topic they don't cover. Yeah. So, for example, we're going to play between episodes 6 and 7. And we know certain bullet points have to occur, but there's a whole lot of undefined stuff that could theoretically have happened in there and been resolved before episode 7 even occurs.
Yeah.
So, what is it between those movies? It's 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
This is supposed to...
Oh, yeah.
So, you could have whole movements, whole issues, whole wars pop up and be resolved, before that happens.
The only Star Wars game I've ever run as a GM, I actually ran at a con, like a couple cons ago, and it was actually the Bothans that died. And to get the Death Star plans, to get it to them.
The second Death Star plans.
Yeah.
Right.
But, that's something that they mention in the story, so it was kind of like that tie-in. Everybody kind of knows that line. But there's not, at least as far as I know, I haven't read that book particularly, like the story of how did they get them? How did they get there after all the Bothans died? How the hell did they get the plans if everybody died?
Right.
So that was like the story that they played out, which was cool, like a cool little like parallel adjacent story that then fed into the narrative that everybody knew.
I want to run a GameCon one-shot called Many Bothans Died, and everyone turns over their character sheets, and they're all playing Bothans.
Yeah.
I think it would be awesome.
See, mine, they all played droids, and they woke up in the ship with all the dead Bothans there.
Right.
And it was the droids that managed to then take the plans that the Bothans had found, and then get them to the...
It's the best hook ever, Kimmy. It really is one of the best stories ever. It's like, everybody wakes up, and they all turn over the character sheets. Oh my God, we're all droids!
No, they didn't know it at first, because I didn't write it on there, so they were asking, what do I see? And then they were rolling, and it took them about 4 or 5 minutes to be like, wait a minute, I think I'm a droid. It's like, yes, you are, and they thought it was fun.
It's genius.
I screw with people when I play games.
So, they're on a ship full of dead Bothans, and they're the ones that have to continue on. It's so smart. It was so awesome. Best
Atomic Samurai Borg is thinking the exact thing I am. He's thinking DCC, Zero-Level Bothan Funnel Adventure, with many Bothans dying.
Nice, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the
exactly
Bothans.
where my mind went as well.
Yeah,
so many die for them.
Classics, you get half a dozen Bothans, and one by one, they're all going to die.
The Galaxy Crawl.
Turns out Bothans are like lemmings; they just die anyway. That's kind of their thing. So it really wasn't that tragic because the whole planet is.
That's how they get the intelligence.
Yes,
they just take a horde of Bothans.
Right.
And they just dogpile it until one of them gets it
the
and
information.
transmits it.
Bothans are the kobolds of the Star Wars universe.
Yes, exactly.
So we kind of talked about, and I don't know, maybe this is, hopping along the topic a little bit too much, but we talked about running canon in like things like Star Wars and things like that. But what about running canon adventures that your group came up with? Like, we're running the 4th game soon of our L5R campaign that's all in the same world. And L5R has a lot of canon with it, but we've also created a bunch of canon with these campaigns.
A great example of trying to stick with what happens in the books, and you can't. We make bad choices and other stuff happens. It's easier to acknowledge the canon and start from there and move on.
But like the canon that we've created as a group.
Yeah,
like,
there is a big difference there. I've got this right now in one of the actual plays we're running, because the campaign they're playing right now takes place time-wise in parallel with the campaign that they just reached the I don't say end of, but it's like a pause in, because we have temporarily lost a player. But how? Because see, here we're looking at something different, because it's not somebody else's story.
Yeah,
it's their story.
Yeah,
they wrote this. They do care about this, and I think to some extent the answer lies right there, of saying to them, okay, if you guys loved your canon, want to keep your canon, look, I as a game master can only do so much. I'm not going to put somebody in front of you and antagonize you with them and expect you're not going to react. So I'm going to give you guys some birth, but within that, it's your canon you created. You guys have to just kind of we need an agreement here, a gentleman's or a lady's agreement here, that we're not going to derail that. We're going to just work past it, and nobody's going to try to kill our Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So you don't game with assholes. Yeah, that's
exactly.
What are you saying?
And if they want to tear up
that's
their
rule.
own
Kimmy's
canon,
rule number one.
Yeah. That is.
If they want to tear up their own canon, I don't know. When I was a kid, if one of my siblings built something out of blocks that I knocked it over, I got my ass whooped.
Yeah.
If I built something out of blocks that knocked it over, it was
who cares?
Just a poor life choice.
Yeah. A lot of work to pick it up.
No, you've just reconstructed it into something better. It's like, once you build a bad Parthenon, you knock it down to build a better one.
Did you build the Parthenon as a kid?
Maybe. We had a Rector set.
There is an attraction to playing Godzilla with your blocks.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
Don't do that with Lincoln Logs; it'll hurt.
Yeah.
Or Legos.
Yes, when you have kids and the midwife walk to the bathroom and you find all the Legos that they lost. Yeah, it happens every. Yeah.
I have decided I'm going to kickstart the world's most deadly weapon, a Lego D4.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know how
that
it's
would be
going
it.
to work yet. I have no idea how this comes together, but it's in the back of my head.
See, what they really need to do with Legos, and I should trademark this before I say it on air, but whatever, they should put little metal pieces in them, so then all you have to do is run it over with a big magnet. That's how I pick up needles in my sewing room.
Right.
Because that's how that works. So put little metal bits in every Lego, and suddenly run your big magnet, pick them all up, and you're done.
Except the plastic is going to be weaker than the metal. So, and you've now introduced a structural weakness, which basically means what you've done is effectively created caltrops.
That's the D4 Lego is a caltrop. I mean, right there.
Just a little metal piece in it.
D4 Lego is still under design. Top men.
Top men.
Many Bothans have died testing.
See, they need to get a woman to design it, then it'll be perfect.
They'll come in pairs.
They will.
All right. Let's. Should we go on to emails?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
That sounds good. What time is it? It's been an hour and a half.
We're not getting derailed at all.
No, not at all.
Do the riddle.
I blame myself. I started this.
Murder, Hoboism, and the Exploitation of the NPC from Fredericks. Would someone like to read this?
It's a great title. That's a great essay.
I'll read it.
Well, I did the title.
I like that.
Because I like the term murder hoboism.
I know.
You
I
do.
can tell.
Yeah, subtitle, which I think is really what he wrote. Murder, Hobos, and Exploitation. From Fredericks on the forum. Dear douche booters.
I did go on the forum and I told people that some Fear the Boot guys are going to be coming on.
Nice.
So if you have anything you want to talk about.
Excellent. I'm old school. I was playing D&D back when it was simply kill orcs and take their stuff. Indeed, characters got XP based on what they killed and how much stuff they took. Over the decades, games have changed. Objectives have become broader, and often XP is awarded for narrative rather than blood and gold. Games have gotten more inclusive, of course. Women are allowed to play now.
What?
It's just it's a phrasing. It's a phrasing issue.
And more importantly, female characters are no longer hobbled by historical realism. The opportunity to play something you aren't has, I believe, given role players courage to become what they've always felt they were inside. Many trans people have found their true selves through gaming, and so the hobby as a whole should be proud of its progressive nature, certain reactionary elements notwithstanding. But I have a niggling problem. I've never heard the word niggling.
Oh no, I use that a lot.
It is a real word and unrelated to the other.
Yes.
So
Oh, okay.
it is completely fine.
I think it's Scandinavian,
No,
ancient Viking thing. Yeah.
Niggling seems, I don't know, it sounds like sex.
It just means chewing at the back of your mind.
Yes.
It's totally not sex. Okay.
It's not niggling is not sex.
Okay.
No.
It sounds like it should be, though, right? Like, am I the only one? Never mind.
You're the only
No,
one.
niggling sounds like foreplay, not sex.
Right, you're right. It's definitely like the little thing you do before you get to the main
Yes.
event. Yeah.
You're literally the first people I've ever encountered who have encountered the word niggling and gone to sex instead of racism. But continue.
That's how we work. That's how we roll at Happy Jacks.
No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'm
Okay.
getting this.
See,
It's
Chris
not
got
either,
me.
though.
Chris
It's
got
not
me.
sex, it's not racism.
No. It started with the second edition of 7th Sea. As a fan of Richard Lester's The Best Three Musketeer films, I was keen to jump on board with the Kickstarter. John Wick has worked hard to make the game more inclusive than previous versions. The only kissing couples illustrated in the core book are same-sex, and people that might have once been portrayed as savages and some dark continent are now playable characters with deep and old philosophies. Hooray! The adventures are, I'm sure, all about swashbuckling and daring do, but as I read the core book, I get less and less interested in playing it. Because despite its proud social justice stance, it portrays a period that was all about Europeans killing brownskins and taking their stuff.
Yeah.
You can't be a dashing lesbian pirate or a male pirate in dress, thank you, Robert De Niro, but if you aren't killing people and taking their stuff, then actually you aren't a pirate.
You aren't a pirate.
Wait. No. We're finishing the email, then we'll
All right.
talk. Vampires kill normals and take their blood. Samurai kill or otherwise punish peasants and take their crops. Even Stu's dirigibles in the space game was about Anglos killing Germans over what Anglos killing Germans over who gets to plunder the native resources for the zoological society. We think we've come so far in RPGs over almost 5 decades, but we're still mostly murder hobos. Is that all there is? Or can the hosts and guests each tell us about one favorite game that doesn't boil down to exploiting NPCs? Fredericks.
Every single game.
So this is a pretty softball question then.
Right? We thought we'd start you off with an easy one.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I'm gonna put this to you straight up.
Okay.
Okay. Fuck their books. The books give you a system. They give you a framework for telling a story. Tell your story. There is nothing in the games, at least the games that I am most familiar with, which is a pretty good number of games, that necessitates you doing any of this stuff. That may be what they portray. That may be the storylines they peddle. That may be what the art depicts. That may be what the implied setting is. But there is absolutely nothing that says this is what you have to do. And let me give you 2 examples of games that I played that went like this. One was a Shadowrun game where I was running it, but there was an NPC who was an orc, and he was a semi-major NPC. He wasn't a top tier NPC, but he wasn't background fluff either. And his thing was that he defied the stereotypes that would exist within the Shadowrun context of racism about orcs. Mm-hmm. He was well-groomed, he was well-educated, he was very high up, he had a position of authority, and this was the story I chose to tell, and there's nothing in the Shadowrun rulebook that would stop me, and even if there was, I mean, what is Jordan Weissman or whoever going to come to my house and try and break my kneecaps? Mm-hmm. I found it, and I realize I'm wading into a bit of a controversial topic here, but I think it was in 5th edition D&D when they had that paragraph saying, oh, if you want to, you can play trans or genderqueer or, non-heteronormative characters. To me, it was almost insulting, not because of its content, but because of what it implies. that as if any prior edition of D&D you couldn't. Like, if it's not in the rulebook giving you permission, you couldn't do it.
Right, but you have to like think of it from the point of view of someone just jumping into the hobby. Someone
Okay,
just
fair enough.
right, someone just jumping into the hobby doesn't necessarily know that. They've played Monopoly, they've played video games where the rule book is like how you play. So if you're reading the
But even when you jumped into the hobby, or when I jumped into the hobby, I mean, yes, you had this little framework that, okay, so this is just like you said, this is how I have to play, or this is telling me how I have to play. But it didn't take long for you to realize, wait a second, I can play a female character, and I can play a female character that's not how a man might stereotypically play a female character based on his own biases, and then you can make the progressions from there. And then when you begin to meet other people who do that, it can adapt your play style and your growth as a player.
100%. But I think also a huge part of that is because I was very lucky when I jumped into the hobby. For real, like I did it a little bit in junior high, which was just a clusterfuck. But like when I really jumped into the hobby, I had great people to play with who were accepting and okay with that. There are games you jump into and they're like, well, it doesn't say you can do that in the rule book. Like I've flat out seen that, and we've heard horror stories, and that's one of the experiences that women share with me the most. Is like I sat down at the table, and I wanted to play this, and they were like, "No, you get to play this. We need a healer. Here, you do this."
Okay, yeah, fuck that.
Oh yeah,
100%.
Yeah, I mean that's BS, and if you're a woman, a minority, whatever
Exactly.
it is you are, don't put up with that. Those are bad people. There are good people in the hobby. Just, look for somebody else. Or, trust me, you look around, you will find people who aren't like that. Don't put up with that, period.
Yeah, and I think this ties back to like what we were kind of talking about earlier is like the representation, like people seeing, people hearing us and putting this message out there. Like I'll admit, when I got in the hobby, like looking at rule, and I still like sometimes we'll like play games like we were playing some of the Palladium games. Like those rule books are pretty old. You open it, and as a woman, I'm like, oh wow, she's got like a quarter yard of fabric over her tits. That's nice. Okay, I feel totally
and she
comfortable.
can shoot things out of them too.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's amazing. So, I mean, there is something you kind of are like, okay, well, I get that this has moved past this now, and I've seen the change. Like looking at the D&D 5e rulebook, like there's some amazing armor and females and representation in there, like all different, ethnic backgrounds, looking all these things. Which, like, seriously, when I opened that book, I was really excited about that. And
let me give you two games.
Okay.
I'll give you, because your point is well taken about it's what on Fear the Boot we call the implied setting.
Right.
That every game has in it, even if there's not an explicit setting, it has implications that it communicates through the language it uses, the pictures it uses, the things it rewards you for, the pellets on the hamster wheel, that imply a certain kind of game. And the truth is, you don't have to play that. But your point is well taken that somebody that's new to the hobby or really narrow-minded wouldn't do that. So let me give you two games where you play the underdog. You play the social outcast. One is an older game. I don't think it's still in print, but you can dig up copies of it, I'm sure, in game bins and theoretically probably by Googling for a PDF of it, but I won't suggest that. But it's a game called Justifiers. In Justifiers, what you play is humanity exists and is back on Earth or in their main colony world, and they need to send out people to do very, very stupid and dangerous things, to call local wildlife or explore a dangerous planet or whatever. And it's this kind of mix of action and Star Trek sort of science mystery stuff. But what you play is a group of genetically engineered human-animal hybrids that are hybridized for the animal properties that make them useful, but they are considered ultimately non-people and disposable. And you play that underclass. An actual human doesn't have any interest in you. You are sent out to do the things they don't want to do. To give a real-world metaphor, these were the Irishmen or the Chinamen that they sent in to set off the detonations when they were making railroad tunnels.
Or Bothans.
Or boffins, yes. They just plain don't care. Another game that I think portrays this and does it well, once again within both the implicit, in this case, the explicit setting as well, is Paranoia. Because you play somebody who is low on the totem pole, who is oppressed, who is manipulated, and in that game, in the newer editions, they say, for example, that you are not allowed to have heterosexual sex or romance because it's considered an affront to Friend Computer's cloning program. So you may only engage in homosexual sex because it's considered good exercise. But it's a game that caters to that sense of you are forever the underdog, the servile class. You are not the person on top. And you are trying to constantly stagger around the people who are in positions of privilege and power to make it to the next day.
Interesting.
There's another aspect to this email that I got out of this, because the title is Murder Hobos, and perhaps it's just me, but I find that a lot of people approach games with a set of expectations. The fighter fights. He doesn't talk. The magician throws fireballs and there's nothing else. Nobody thinks outside that little box. More often than not, in the real world, the last thing a Navy SEAL wants to do is shoot his gun and kill people. They really want to try to talk it out or find another alternative for it. And yet, when people come into a role-playing game, I'm the fighter, I'm just going to go kill it. They're stuck in this rut of following what they're told or what they think the expectation is for their character to do. And it can be predictive and boring, and ultimately I think it's not fun, but people don't know any better. They don't know that you can play a fighter and actually it's okay not to kill something every game. It's all right. You can actually talk to stuff and interact with stuff and, have moral questions about stuff that happens in the game. You don't have to kill everything.
One of the things that I was going to interrupt you when you were reading the email about pirates. Blackbeard only got in like 1 or 2 fights his entire career.
Yeah.
He raised his flag, they gave up because he had a reputation. One of the fights he was in was the one that killed him. But prior to that, they would just come up to a ship, get into a position where they had the advantage for the wind or whatever, raise their flag and drop the flag, put up the white flag, take what you want, and they would leave. Very often they would let them keep the ship.
And more often than not,
the pirates weren't murder hobos.
Well,
so if you want to play like a realistic historical pirate game,
yes,
you're going to play a very boring pirate game for one thing,
right?
Because you're not going to have a lot of that stuff. But pirates weren't. They didn't want to go in and fight people any more than anyone else does.
Because people would die by getting a scratch and die because there were no antibiotics. So nobody wants to fight. Yeah,
no one wants to go charging in with swords against other people who also have swords. That's suicide.
Exactly.
Getting cut hurts.
So
another game that I found does this pretty well, and I think you could do this. While I have my preferred edition, which shockingly is years out of print, I think you do this with any version of the game, because the setting that the going back to canonicity, the setting that the canon has already enshrined centers around this is Star Trek. Because Star Trek is a game that is all about diversity and oppressed classes and social themes and things like that. And so there's a game that is very, very friendly.
Yeah.
Even at the level of, if anyone's watched a few episodes of Star Trek, they get that. That, this is the idea that anyone can be anything. And it's a game about what you can do, not what you can't do. And it's also not a game, going back to the murder hobo things, it doesn't reward the murder hobo thing. Because when you get shot, and I don't know how it is in every edition, but just going by the editions that I've played and what's in the show, somebody shoots you with a phaser or disruptor, it's not 25 points of damage. You're not there.
Yeah,
right.
If you pull those guns, you better freaking mean it.
Yeah.
And it creates this incentive to solve things and Starfleet's ideology aside, which that, of course, should be a very powerful theme in your game, but even if you put that aside, the knee-jerk reaction to whip out a gun and shoot, once again, you don't take 2d6 damage. You take vaporized damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're dead or not. But yeah, I still think. Okay, go ahead.
Along those same lines, Legend of the Five Rings, because one of the things that I think sets Star Trek apart is because of the fact that there is the prime directive, and there is that we do things in a moral way. L5R is the same way. You've got the tenets of Bushido. It's hard to be a murder hobo and maintain your honor.
Well, and if you want to stick,
it's just difficult.
If you want to stick with systems, I mean, GURPS is a great example of a deadly system.
You can totally be a murder hobo.
Yeah, you can totally be.
but the thing is,
I think it's like a specialty of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's easy to kill anybody if
yes.
And
so it's easier to be a murder hobo.
And it's easier to die. So people approach a game differently when they're playing GURPS, which is instead of just charging in because they know a headshot can take you down, they might actually stop and try to talk to the kobolds first.
But,
avoid them.
To me, that almost creates kind of a false sense of morality. Because it's morality out of fear rather than morality out of I am this way and I have a responsibility to my society to behave the way I'm expected to behave. Do you see the distinction I'm talking?
I do. If you're actually going out to kill the band of kobolds, that's fine. If you're just trying to get from point A to point B and there's kobolds in between, you would rather avoid them. It's two different moral conundrums.
I think a lot of that too comes from the fact of this gets into a little bit of a meta kind of thing, but players know they're in a game, and so it provides that license to misbehave in a certain way that you would never do in real life.
Oh, sure.
I've got 3 dailies left. I need to use them.
Yeah, exactly. So they're invested in the game, but not they're invested with a lowercase I as opposed to the capital I, meaning like what we're doing here really matters, and my character could die. There's no coming back from this, and there's so many safety nets built in to prevent that. It allows you to. It's a lot like literally the show Westworld in the sense that you can go and engage in all of this reckless behavior with little to no consequences.
That's what is going to bring me to the point I was going to start with originally, which is regardless of setting, you can set up a game where the choices that they make don't always have to be killing stuff. I mean, when Dave and I came up with Mission Imbartable, backstory for you guys, I set up a game in 5e where everybody's a bard, and it's based on the original television series Mission Impossible. Because it occurred to me that all the Mission Impossible guys are con men, disguise artists, entertainers, seductresses, all of that. They're bards. So I assembled a group of bards, and they had to go in and infiltrate and get up. And I set up the premise, which is you need to get the child out of this castle who's being carried by his step-parents, and everybody. And if you get in trouble, we're going to disavow your life. And there was no combat. And I think at the con, somebody really wanted to kill somebody just to prove the point, but the point was within D&D 5e, I had set up an area where they could just come in and not have to kill everything, and they had to think, they had to exploit the resources and everything, and everybody had a great time.
But did they still exploit the NPCs?
No.
Even though killing them, because you can still exploit NPCs without killing them.
Well, okay.
Because that was the question.
Yes and no, because they were gathering resources and stuff, but eventually what they did is they snuck in and charmed and bought their way in and found their way in and got the guy and got out. So nobody died, but they were exploiting them by talking.
Kim, I have an honest question for you.
Yes.
This is not a loaded question or whatever. This is an honest question.
Yeah.
How would you define the difference between exploit and peacefully interact? So let's say I encounter kobolds. What would be the line between I'm exploiting them and I'm simply finding a non-violent resolution to this situation?
Can I give my...
No, he has
Can I give my politically incorrect answer?
No, he said my name.
Oh, damn it. Okay, go ahead.
It's directed at her.
It's directed to me. I would say, there, a lot of players will exploit that situation, but there are ways to do it. For example, my character in L5R is super. I'm actually the only one who has a lot of morals in that party. Stork.
And I'm dead.
His character's dead.
Oh, spoiler! Sorry. Anyway,
sacrifice.
like finding a way to trade with them, like something they want. If it's something they want, maybe it doesn't have equal value, but maybe if they still want it that much, like that's not exploiting them. If it's a willing trade and something
You mean like
that they
shiny
want.
beads for a plot of land?
Sure, if they want shiny beads. I mean,
Wow. Okay. I'm not.
you have to also like think about the agency of those characters. Like maybe do they farm? I don't know about kobolds. Do kobolds farm? Do they ever use for that land? Maybe they can trade those shiny beads for something more. Like maybe that's actually more valuable to them as a people.
So let me give you an example. And
Okay,
and
that would be helpful.
Okay, now I want you to tell me how you would interpret this one.
Okay.
So let's say we're near the entrance of a dungeon, and we know we need something farther down. This dungeon's atop much more ancient ruins, and so we need to get 3 levels down or whatever. And near the entrance, we encounter a tribe of kobolds who have taken up residence at the upper level of this cave. And when we encounter them, we just lay it out for them straight. Look, we found you, we could fight you, and we might win, or you guys might win, but a great loss yourself. Or you can simply let us pass, and we won't harm you. And on top of that, we're going to cut you 2 things. One, when we get out of here, we will never mention your existence to anybody. And secondly, if we find any great treasure down below, we'll share, I don't know, 10, 20% of it with you guys for letting us pass peaceably. And the kobolds, you roll your what checks or RP convincingly or whatever it is the game master wants. And the kobolds go along with this. Honest question, is that exploitation or is that a friendly interaction?
That's bartering. That's like, to me, that doesn't seem like exploitation.
Okay, so here's what I agree. I agree. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page rather than presuming.
Yeah.
But I agree. And here's what I would say is there are 2 things a game master can do to help with this. And players, I think, can do one of these 2, the first one. The first one is simply to mention this possibility or to show it's possible.
Yes.
That when the kobolds show up, one of them attempts to address the party. Maybe they speak, I think kobolds speak Draconic, and so maybe one of them tries a party member speaks Draconic, and you as the game master know that, or speaks Broken Common, or whatever. Or if it's a party member steps forward and tries to talk to them, and this doesn't have to result in combat. And this is something the players or the game master can do, is to show it is possible.
Absolutely.
To show there is a third route here, that there is a way to do this in a mutually beneficial sort of way.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I would say is, as a game master, and I don't know that players can do this as well, but as a game master, players, like anybody else, if you look at like a call center, and I know this from having worked, I've never worked in a call center, but I've worked around call centers. If you tell the people that your metric you're being judged by is how quickly you turn over the calls, they're going to turn those calls over as quickly as they can.
Yeah.
If you tell them your metric is the number of problems successfully solved, those calls slow down, but problems get solved. In the same way, whatever it is a pellet is dispensed for, people start to understand that this is the way the game's going. I mean, we talked about the implied setting that's given by a rulebook, but the game master and the other players are also creating an implied setting by the way they play the game.
Yeah.
And so if somebody comes in and kills the kobolds and they get X, but if somebody negotiates past the kobolds and the game master says, you know what, that was such a neat solution, I'm going to give you bonus XP, and on top of that, somebody make a note, you now have a friend in this kobold tribe, and they might help you out in the future. You need someplace to lay low, they might hide you away.
Yeah.
Or show you a way to bypass level 2 of the dungeon and get straight to level 3.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. But we're going to reward you for having found a different solution to this problem.
Absolutely. The Pavlovian response where it's like, ring the bell, give him a treat, like 100% works.
It's also a matter of making sure you have players that are flexible for that, because you get the guy that's optimized his fighter to kill and stab stuff, isn't necessarily going to sit around and watch everybody else talk to the things. It's like, well, I haven't done anything all game.
He's taken all the fighty feats. He wants to use his fighty feats.
Well, yeah, and
sure,
are you
give
doing
him
the
something
fighter a
to
disservice?
Well, yeah. I mean, as the GM, that's when you know that. You plan ahead and say, hey, the kobolds have been being attacked while they're, foraging in the forest. There's a big bear or whatever that's killing them. Let the fighting guy go kill the bear and, to pay off, like, getting past the kobolds. Like, you can find things that these people need that can be an equitable trade that isn't exploitive that uses, like, violent abilities.
Murder was an exploitation?
There's also, I mean... He mentioned one of the two settings I'm working on for Moment of Truth.
Vast Dominions.
Vast Dominions. Vast Dominions is a parody setting.
Yes.
And it basically is taking the colonialism of the 19th century and pre-World War I and breathing new life into it. Because, we don't have to have World War I and find out how horrible we can be to each other.
Yeah.
We can be horrible to other people out in space instead,
Space
right?
people.
And that's kind of, I mean, one of the chapters, like chapter 7, is conservationists and other troublemakers. That's the tone of the game.
Right.
The game is about we're going to go out and conquer space, right? The other thing is Bloodblade and Tusk, which is the medieval setting that takes place before the Normandy invasion, where orcs take over France, and you have basically the remnants of the Holy Roman Empire at that point. People back in that era were horrible to each other in ways most of us can't even begin to imagine.
And life was cheap.
Because I've been reading a lot about what society was like then.
Yeah.
Everyone was horrible to everyone else.
Life was short.
It was standard.
It was nasty, brutish, and short.
I have a whole chapter on just the justice system and the various tortures that existed at the time and the people who showed up to them and their reactions to these things. The sense of morality and the sense of a moral center
the moral
is
compass
almost alien to them compared to what we think of it today.
Yes.
So,
because people died on your doorstep from anything, and sometimes from your neighbors.
absolutely,
It was horrifying.
some of the stuff I've read, I wish I hadn't read it.
No,
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
awful.
they were horrible to each other all the time, and their wars were even worse.
Yeah. I would say, Fredericks, that yes, I do feel like, I mean, are we there yet? Are we at the final form of gaming, and whether, it being inclusive and it being not exploitative and things like that? No, we're definitely not. But I feel like it's come a huge way, at least since I've even been in the hobby, like seeing the different options. Like you said, when you started playing, it was kill ogres and steal their stuff, or orcs. But it makes me sad.
I don't know. Very early on, even in as early as like the mid 1980s, we were running games where the party would come into town and they were looking for wrongs to right. And they weren't looking to exploit people. They weren't murder hobos. I mean,
they weren't looking to, but did they torture people to get things they wanted?
That group, no.
Oh, well,
very rarely.
That's a rare group.
What they would do, though, if they got into a fight with someone and they had to kill the guy, and they would even get in fights with people, and after the guy's down and hurt, because this is GURPS, so if you take enough damage, you're not fighting as well. They would give them a chance to give up. But if they had to, okay, and kill them, and then of course they're going to pick through the body.
I'd just like to point out that I'm 4 for 4 for throwing my cans in that trash can over there.
I haven't missed one
I'm
yet.
just going to point that out.
Well done.
Thank you. Right?
But I mean, that's not every group that does
that's a rare
murder
group.
hobos.
One of the things that I think is absolutely fascinating is the kids game you ran for Zachary and all those little kids. Those kids were amazing. I was just helping and watching, and they came up with so many non-exploitative, super non-violent answers to their problems. It was we put up PCs were oh, this is the bad guy. Oh, well, we feel bad for him. Let's talk to him and figure out what he needs. Why is he doing this? So I feel And also because I work with kids,
And
so
then,
I
like,
have a soft spot
the
for them.
oldest kid there was my daughter, who at the time was like 11.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Let me go
just
ahead.
for a second, and like I feel like there's some of that is kind of learned as we go through and we become like hardened adults. Like as a kid, you see those possibilities. You have problems because I deal with those all day, but like the magic of let's like empathizing with that bad guy is something I feel like, and we're all kind of inherently born with, and then we kind of like lose it as we get older, and as we start to play games and we start to play video games and things like that, and play these tabletop games in a way that there's not that resolution, that the quickest way to get what we want is the violent route, the torture route, the
Sometimes the only
seduction
way.
route, whatever it is, that I think sometimes we forget and we get closed off to those possibilities that maybe we naturally would come up with.
I
as
can't
younger
tell you
people.
any boss fights where I could talk my way out of it. You have to fight them.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say, Dan?
I, as a game master, have absolutely allowed that on several occasions where the party has flipped the boss rather than fight the boss. But Kimmy, something I was going to point out is I would wager, having watched people game with kids. Now, of course, I didn't observe your specific game,
Right.
but having watched people game with kids, is there's also difference in the game master response.
Yes.
What happens is you encounter the mustache twirling bad guy, and the kids suddenly say, "Oh, well, we feel bad for him, and we want to empathize with him and understand him and see what we can do to make him feel better, and to not be this kind of person." And you as an adult say, "Oh, isn't that cute?" And you go with that. You say, "Well, he's upset about this, because he, I don't know, lost his wife to some disease a year ago. I don't know, whatever." But you come up with your reason why he's bad.
Right.
And you let them operate within that to change that. And I think part of what happens, unfortunately, is we take that depth away. Because what happens there is those kids are actually getting a better villain than the generic adult game gets.
Oh, sure.
Because
Oh, yeah.
That's a villain who has a story, who is not monodimensional, who has, other issues going on. There's something that drove them to what they are and could theoretically take them off that path. And what happens too many times when we get to these adult games, quote unquote, or the games we play as adults, is that's not an option anymore. The bad guy's going to fight you, period. The idea that you can understand, and why is the evil wizard evil? Well, he just is. He's power hungry, he's insane, he wants to rule the world and has no particular motivation for doing this.
Right.
And we create these monodimensional, nonsensical enemies, and it perpetuates the style of gaming where someone who came to this with an empathetic approach would find no place in that game.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that occurs from the game master down.
Yes.
Which is why I cannot suggest enough that I totally recognize what you're saying about the implied setting. But goodness gracious, these rule books are just frameworks. My advice to anyone listening who's new to gaming is all these books are doing is giving you a place to start and a mechanic for resolving dispute.
Yeah.
They're not here to tell you how to play the game and what kind of stories to tell.
Right.
You bring up a good point, but I want to point out the feedback loop again, which is if you have an adult player that says, "Oh, Mr. Wizard, what's wrong?" And all of a sudden that monochromatic bad guy that you had just set up, you now have to come up with a backstory for it, because that's really what the kids did. Stu just set up a bad guy. When they started asking questions, he had to come up with those answers. It's almost a matter of the players training. I know when I was playing back in the day when we first did D&D, we were all pretty much just following the Lord of the Rings quest setup. It was in our head. That's what we did. That's what we thought was the way to do the game. We didn't think that you could talk your way out of combating orcs. Orcs were bad. Orcs wanted to kill us. They were, doing this thing. It never occurred to us that that was an option. And I think that players get stuck in their roles. They get stuck in the baggage of the system, of the tropes, and they can't sometimes think around that or think outside of that.
Yeah. I think that's why it's important, even though you're absolutely right, the book does not dictate what you do in your world. by any means. I think that those elements, like that paragraph you were talking about earlier, the artwork, all those things, being inclusive, being accepting, and stating like, hey, this is what we've come up with, but you can do whatever you want. And I think the D&D books have said that from the beginning. Like, you guys are creating your own game, that says some variation on that in just about every game book that I know of.
Well, in High Gygaxian, that takes about 5 paragraphs to say, but yes.
Right, of course. Because I speak Quenya, but that's a little complicated even for me. But, I think that just having that there is kind of like to help lessen that barrier to entry and be like, have people know, okay, so this is, more guidelines than actual rules, like to use the quote everybody uses and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think it's important.
It is. I think we're all guilty on all sides. I think GMs set up one-dimensional villains, and I think players drop into their roles really easily.
GMs then reward that.
I don't set up one-dimensional villains.
No, because you're good.
I'm no mere hedge mage.
You know nothing about him. You murdered him before he could ever find anything.
So we don't know what happened. He probably had some epic, 4-page backstory. We just never know because I am no mere hedge mage. I am now a corpse.
Got blown out of the water.
They one-shot it. They finally got to the point where I think the party was ready to take on a mage who's got fireball. They were 3rd level or 4th level.
Yeah.
And he rolled poorly on his initiative, and they killed him before he got his turn.
We attacked him with a rhino.
Flaws of the system.
Impaled by a rhino.
Yeah.
But my point is, I think that we're all guilty on all sides. I think GMs are guilty of not maybe setting up a situation where players can talk their way out of a situation. There's I'm gonna set up a mage combat. And it's gonna be a combat. And if somebody came up and went, "Oh, Mr. Wizard, here's a flower. Can we talk this out?" And you're gonna go, "Die!" But instead, if it were kids, you'd be like,
and depending,
yes, maybe we can talk this out.
And depending on his motivation, he might take the flower, or it might be like Kent State.
And there's your exception.
Wow.
But it doesn't undermine the fact that it doesn't undermine the fact that we all still fall into these tropes, and I think that that's important to examine.
All right, let's go to the next email.
There isn't one.
Yes, there is. There's one more.
There's a riddle.
Riddle me this, douchebag.
This is one that they've really been listening
I only got the one page.
Turn the page.
I did.
Oh, did I not give you that?
No, you've got another page. See there? Yeah.
The same email in my thing is copy and pasted twice.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Riddle me this?
Maybe
it is the actual same text. It's got a different name. But
oh, well, then I should read it then. Sorry.
You should. Well done, Stuart.
Let me go find that email real quick.
That was a good discussion, though, guys. Well done. High fives.
Well, thank you.
Let's see, where would I put that? I would put that under Happy Jack's email, listener emails.
This is riveting, Stu. Like hearing you navigate your computer.
Looking.
This is what people love. This is the Happy Jack's quality that people tune in for. Let me tell you.
Chris has been awfully quiet. So, Chris, tell us about your worst gaming nightmare while Stu looks this up.
Honest to God, my worst gaming nightmare?
Yeah.
You really want to know?
Yeah, we love nightmares.
Well, now I do.
All right. So this happened to me. We were doing a kind of a round robin GMing of an Earthdawn campaign, and so it was my turn to be the player, and we had another one of the guys in our regular group be the GM, and he had set up a villain for my Swordmaster, and we were playing an Earthdawn. And for those of you who don't know, Swordmaster is kind of like the specialized duelist class. So they are, in essence, a fighter, but they are the swashbuckling, taunting type fighter in the game. And so I had a bit of a kind of a showdown with this guy who was going to be my long-term villain, and things weren't necessarily going my way, and my character was knocked out, and when I awoke, it had become very evident to me, and this is the GM describing this to me, by the way, and he used other terms, but that not only and then defeated, or at least, somewhat humiliated by my eventual nemesis, he had also then ass raped me.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
Oh my God.
So he treated me basically. He brought up the gimp, and
oh man, that is not okay.
No, it was not okay. It was not okay. It was not okay.
There's actually a video online with Boba Fett in the
my
French
gosh,
Montreal.
yes.
Yes.
That one's funny, but that one's also supposed to be absurd.
Yes,
It's not
it is.
supposed to be suggestive to courses of action.
That's awful.
And it was just so far, and that was the weird thing about it, is that this was so far out of left field. And this was a guy, I mean, we were friends outside of the game, and and everything had been relatively normal up until this point, but this just came out of nowhere. And I'm thinking in my head, like, what the fuck are you talking about, Dave?
Yeah.
But it was just, and I'm basically, I was like I am now. I just couldn't quite. I didn't even know what to say. I didn't even know what to do after that.
Was this the same gaming group where they were showing each other their balls around the table?
No, that was in college.
Oh, that's a different gaming group.
That was a much different, and that wasn't me. This actually, okay. So
I'm beginning to question Chris's choices in gaming groups here.
Yeah,
I do.
but that's like a rage quit table flip moment, like burn the house to the ground moment.
When he was telling the story, and of course our Fear the Boot doesn't use cameras. When he was telling the story, he lives in Iowa. Most of us live in or around St. Louis, so we record locally, and Chris remotes in. And when Chris was first telling the story, I wish there had been a camera in this room, because everyone around the table was giving each other these total, like,
what
the fuck are we hearing?
Yeah.
And
So,
people
Chris, tell the story. This is
continue.
This terrible.
Yeah, so this was in college, actually. This is my freshman year in college, and I was the only theater major on my dorm floor, and everyone else around me, with the exception of maybe like one or two people, were primarily Phi-Ed majors, and so aside from the good-natured ribbing of who had the more difficult classes, they had golf, I had acting, whose class was tougher. I actually got 3 of these guys to play D&D. They had never played D&D before, and this was when 2nd edition was big. And so, stereotypically, funnily enough, I don't know, 4 guys. 3 out of the 4 guys made fighters. These are all Phi-Ed majors, remember? Mm-hmm. And then the 4th guy, he made a fighter. He made a fighter thief. So, they wanted a lot of combat, so I gave them a lot of combat. We're doing that. But then once we kind of got comfortable, and I don't know if this was like the thing for them to do at the time or what, but they would basically like flash each other their nuts during the game. So like they'd be sitting across the table, and then one guy would be like, "Hey, Rich, take a look at my nuts," and he would grab them. And then he would like just the whole unit, twig and berries, and just yank on that sucker and stretch it as far as he possibly could. So Rich could see it better. I wasn't sure. All
right, like I realize in this discussion I'm probably the least experienced, but I fear
clearly
I've always known that like grabbing and yanking, I've always got negative reactions when I did things like that.
You can't pull them very far.
No, they're attached.
And it's not like they
Well,
would pull
that's how old you are.
But they would still do this. And again, I'm behind the GM screen, and again, I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
Because I didn't participate in that.
No.
Because I'm not going to. And they just... And it was all 4 of them would do that occasionally to each other. And I don't know why they would do that.
No, I get that. It's locker room behavior. I completely understand.
It really was.
How do you understand locker room behavior?
I had to take phys ed.
Oh, that one time?
Well, high school, everyone has to take
thing
high
that I've never seen. I fully believe Chris, but like if this was a novel and I hit that chapter, I'd be like, this is implausible.
Yeah, honestly, as you're experiencing it, it seemed implausible. It just was. I don't know.
You know what? I got to say this. It doesn't really go away because I work with a lot of construction crews, and that kind of stuff still kind of happens. It's not quite as graphic, but there's a lot of like, oh man, you should have worn underwear today. Oh really? You want to check it out? And then out they come. You're like, dude, no, I'm
tomorrow if
trying
you
to
want
get some work done. What's wrong with you? So
No,
that still goes on.
Right. Boys are weird.
Dudes are weird.
Yep. Yep.
Very proud of their
No,
junk.
no, these people are. I've never done anything like this. In my life. These people are fucked up. It's not a boys thing. It's these
people.
guys.
You got to go to Iowa more often, I guess.
I'm gonna
Damn
go.
those-
This was when I lived in. This was actually I went to school across the border in Wisconsin. So this is all.
Oh,
happening in
well,
Wisconsin.
yeah, big city.
So-
Oh, yeah.
So the birthplace of role-playing games.
That's true. That's true.
Now, would I be correct in assuming that there was some drinking going on during these games?
Surprisingly, not as much as you'd think.
They were all underage.
Yeah, we were. We were
okay.
all underage,
All
and
right.
so you had to sneak that. You had to do it in the dorm room more than anything else. But
Maybe they were just really
I don't
into
know.
each other and not brave enough to tell each other.
That you know what they could have they very much
Yeah.
could have been. I mean, really, that would not have surprised me
No.
either. So I don't know.
That's not that bad of a horror story. We've heard worse. That's the, you,
No, the
we had
first
to
one was
play
terrible.
Manchester.
The first one's terrible.
yeah.
The first one was
The first one was
awful.
awful. And you know, and the thing was, like, okay, if you want to look at it from like a game analysis point, with no emphasis on the anal and then analysis, by the way. Sorry, it's the
No,
dad joke
I get
in me.
it.
I can't pass it up.
Some people are into it. Come on.
It ruined the
Ruined? Don't you mean rectum?
It killed him.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, I love you guys.
No, you don't. You're like, oh God, what have I done? My integrity.
As obviously as you might expect, my desire to continue to play that character gone. My desire to continue to play in that game gone. You know, and I was actually, even though, but unfortunately, you know, that was like the only group I had. There was no other group to. So I just had to ride it out until it came back around to my turn to GM, and then I never let the reins go at that point. I just never gave them back.
Oh, there you go.
I tried to right that that wrong, and when you're GM, your GM PC, flies into the background, which I was fine with at that point. But it was just that was just a bizarre situation.
And the worst crime is that it all happened off camera without your control. I mean, if you had woken up and had been polymorphed into a brownie, or if you had been, you've been blinded, it's the same kind of thing. It's like all of a sudden, without your decisions, without your choice, without you having to make a roll or anything, something happened to you that was beyond your control, and it really is. Like, I don't know, perhaps
Violating.
it is a violation.
How about there's just some stuff that you just don't do in games?
Yes.
Let's just not have this stuff happen.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
Rape should not be in a game.
No.
Like, to PCs, to NPCs, like, that is just not something that should be in a game. Like, I mean, maybe I'm particularly sensitive to this, but it's like, okay, I don't ever want to sit at the table and have it involve that at all.
Of course.
Like, I am playing in a world with magic, and I am a badass sword fighter or whatever, because I want to get away from things I don't like. Some days it's, the papers I have to grade. Rape is also on the list of things I would like to avoid personally.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, grading papers is the worst.
Well,
And rape, also.
I think I would also raise a question of, if I was playing under a game master who had my character knocked out and then anally raped, it would not only just be I'm upset with what happened, it would be like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Oh, yeah.
Where is
Yeah,
your
yeah.
head at?
Yeah.
Like, this is good storytelling.
It's not like you set it up like okay, if you guys get knocked out, you're going to the Isle of the Rapists. You know what's going to happen, right?
Yes,
None of that
right.
was set up ahead of
We're all on
time.
the same page here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. This is a contest for the right to butt rape.
Right.
Right.
It's
Well, and
still messed up, but
yeah, because RPGs, like, someone was mentioning an email earlier, like, this is sometimes how people explore other parts of their personality. Like, suddenly I'm at a table and I'm like, oh, you are exploring raping people.
exactly.
Like, that makes me
That's-
incredibly uncomfortable, because this is something this person is obviously somewhat...
Getting off on.
Yeah, it's like, well, I certainly don't...
And that was the thing that made this particular incident even weirder, because, I mean, I certainly knew what he was like as a person, and I got that. I understood that part of his personality and all that kind of thing. But those types of things never materialized at the table when he was a player. I mean, like with his PC, he never pursued anything of those actions whatsoever, nor with any of the other other characters when he was running things. It was just it was a weird. I mean, I don't know if it was looking for if he was trying to humiliate this particular PC in such a way, and his mind just went way off the deep end, or what was going on in there in that thought process. It just
this was something that I worked out a couple of years back. Not that rape's a bad idea, but something within the context of
that came to you long before.
But anyone who's a cross-show listener, also listens to Fear the Boot, is well familiar with good old Gnarl the Gnoll. And when I was playing Gnarl and trying to shape Gnollish society, because Chad had given me he was a GM, he gave me pretty free reign to design that culture. And rather than doing hyenas, which are actually cats, I made them dogmen and based their society all around the way that dogs socialize. And so there was a lot of stuff that went on in their society that was about position and dominance and so on and so forth. And I once again designed it very heavily on the way the dogs socialize. And when I got to the particular issue of their sexuality, what I decided was, I don't want to involve that in their struggles of dominance, because the only way you involve sex and dominance in a violent society is rape. I mean, that's violence plus sexuality equals rape. I mean, it's that simple. And so the way that I wrote around it was I went with the fact that dogs, generally speaking, do not have sex at will for pleasure. They do it as an estrus thing. It's more of
it's uncontrollable. They go into heat. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of an urge than it is a desire. And so to them, they simply had outside of seasons of estrus, they had very, very little interest in sex. They didn't have a casually sexual society. And so even if it was a male on female where there was a struggle of dominance, it simply never involved sex of any kind. They'd punch each other around, but they would never go to that level. And so I just found a way to write that portion, that avenue of violence out of the way. And in fact, it actually came up in RP several times because the two humans that were in the party with him were both pretty promiscuous. And he just never understood it. He just was like, I don't get your prefixation with this. It'd be like, to him, it was no different than being absolutely obsessed with taking a dump. This is just what you do. Like, why is this such a central part of your life and whatever?
Yeah. That's a great way to handle it.
That actually calls back to the Ringworld series, Louis Wu and the Zen. Because Louis Wu has a girlfriend at one point, and they're like screwing like bunnies all over the place. And every so often, the Zen comes in like, she's not even in heat. What are you doing?
Yeah. What's wrong with you? It's like, she's not even in season.
I have the email now if you'd like to.
All right, yes.
What's our riddle?
All right.
Riddle me this, douchebags. Salutations. I write you today to commemorate my virginal gaming experience, and I looked it up. Virginal is also an adjective, not just the little piano spin-it thing. It was years ago. Yeah, it's like a little piano. A virginal.
That would not be the first thing I thought of when I heard virginal.
I did not realize it was an adjective. I thought virgin would also be an adjective.
I see what you mean. I was like...
But I was wrong. It actually is.
Yeah.
It was years ago now, but still inclines me to roll my eyes to the point of pain when I think back. My initial experience was encouraging. The GM and I came up with a great in-story reason why my character would be missing most of the weeks because I went to a different university at the time, and we would work together to set up an awesome character concept and backstory. Everything was going great. The first actual game night, however, things took something of an unfortunate turn. Player, I'd like to talk to the caravan guards. GM, they don't trust you, and they raise their crossbows when you open your mouth. Player, I raise my hands and tell them we would like to help them. GM, they fire. Player, do I at least get a diplomacy check? GM, I said they fire. Roll initiative. As combat wrapped up, I asked if we could knock them out, since my character was strongly against killing. The GM responded that they were war-forged robots, so they could not go unconscious and would keep fighting until either we or they were dead. The next session, how naive I was to think things might actually improve, the party was plucked into the astral plane to attend a meeting of the gods, so they could give us a quest to fight a great evil, the equivalent of killing the 7 spirits of Ventuzler. Oh, he put an umlaut over you. Or however the hell you spell it. The GM, speaking through the gods, decided to blackmail us into accepting a quest by mentioning killing the innocent guards, who had in fact been guarding a divine messenger and couldn't risk unknown people compromising their mission. Gosh, didn't you guys figure that out? The GM inquired. When we finally accepted the mission, we were dropped back to the mortal world near the location of our first objective. You see the elven this is the GM. You see the elven forest where one of the evil spirits resides, spread out ahead of you. Off to your left is a lone tower, and behind you is open grassland. Player 1. Okay, let's go to the forest. GM. But there's a tower. Me. The gods didn't mention a tower, did they? GM. Whining. Aw, come on, guys. Player 1. Fine, we go to the tower. I try to pick the lock on the door. The door doesn't open. I cast knock on the door and try to unlock it. Nope, nothing. Player 3. I smash the door with my strength. GM. The door swings open as soon as you touch it. Geez, you guys, it wasn't even locked.
Oh my god.
What followed was a long series of convoluted booby traps, mazes, and ambushes, culminating in a dead-end hallway with scripts in different languages along the walls. We translated them and then got down to solving the riddle they formed. Most all have owned me at some point in life. To some I bring pleasure, to others pain. Seldom am I missed till after I am gone. At times I am treasured, and at others ignored. While often called beauty, I have no value. You have one guess each. Hosts, what do you suppose the answer might be?
Okay, can you read that?
Yeah, read it again.
Sure. Most all have owned me at some point in life. To some I bring pleasure, to others pain. Seldom am I missed till after I am gone. At times I am treasured, and at others ignored. While often called beautiful, I have no value.
Was it hinted at earlier in the email?
No.
Oh.
Most all have owned me at some point in life.
I have a guess.
So you said virginal, and that's what I was thinking. Virginity. No? Okay.
Water.
Hymen.
I'm gonna guess. Children.
No.
That's a good one.
There's another
Yeah, I was thinking youth, except it says most all, not all.
Yeah.
Right.
All have owned me. If it was all have owned me, I would say youth, but it's not most all. It was most all. Most all have owned me at some point in life. To some I bring pleasure, to others pain. Seldom I am missed till after.
A vibrator?
A vibrator?
That's probably not the answer.
No, it probably is, because he's setting us
No.
up for an absurd
No.
answer.
No.
That's not the answer that the GM was.
Non-railroady plot lines.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, exactly.
He said he continued. The party argued over it for about half an hour. We knew out of character what kind of person the GM was.
Uh-oh.
Specifically, the dude had love, duty, honor tattooed on his back. And so when we eventually made our guesses, prompted by the GM declaring that the walls had started closing in on us.
Was it duty?
No. We said things like love, friendship, and beauty. Each time the GM responded, wrong, you disappear, take 3d10 damage.
Oh.
Once we had all reappeared in a different hallway, with no explanation as to why or how, we paused the game and asked what the fuck the actual answer was. His answer? Come on, guys. It was hair. How much more obvious could it be? Guy.
What? What? Who has been hurt by hair?
What?
Other than Rapunzel, I don't know how anybody's weaponized hair.
Let's work through this. Okay, so let's just swap out the me's for hair. Most all have owned hair at some point in life. Okay, I guess that's true.
Mm-hmm.
To some, hair brings pleasure. Okay, I guess I can find that. To others, hair brings pain. What?
If it's pulled.
So seldom hair is missed till after it's gone. Well, how do you miss hair before it's gone? This doesn't even grammatically work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
At times, hair is treasured. At others, hair is ignored. Okay, I guess that's true. While often called beautiful, I have no value. Do you have any idea how much a human hair wig goes for?
Oh, yes. No kidding, right, yeah.
Like hundreds of, yes, I actually...
Yeah, but not in Lord of the Rings times.
Okay.
No, probably even more.
That was more expensive.
No, yeah, it was... No, human hair being sold in the Middle Ages. That was still absolutely a thing.
Right. What are you going to make? What are you going to make it out of polyester in the Middle Ages?
Well, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, which is hairy barbarians everywhere.
No, it's not actually how the Middle Ages worked.
I mean,
like, that's how I imagine them, but that's not how it worked.
There's no Vikings, yeah.
Oh, Vikings.
All right, he continues. The side quest, which let me remind you we would have ignored except for the GM's whining, culminated in a fight with a fire spirit in the top of the tower who, according to the GM afterward,
burned all the hair off.
Had, and I quote, absolutely nothing to do with the main plot. And that was the last time I gamed with that group.
Yeah.
For the record...
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
I blame
Your hair takes 3d10 damage.
For the record...
Save versus bald.
Hey! Who would want to do that? I blame the unrealistic expectations my younger self held squarely on his shoulders. You spoiled me, leading me to expect GMs to encourage player agency, having interesting plots, and building meaningful stories. How dare you? Kind regards, Ollie from California. P.S. Obligatory drink, you swarthy bastards.
Oh no! I'm out of...
You want some? I got some rye.
I'm sorry, man. This
terrible.
Whole thing, start to finish, it alternates between railroady and stupid.
Yeah. And it's a really lame riddle. It's a horribly lame riddle.
We really want to go to the forest.
Hair.
It's terrible.
I think every single one of our answers was like 10 times better. Even the vibrator was better than that.
I gotta say, I've tried to craft riddles before, and it's not easy.
No, it isn't.
I usually stolen them from other places, and then so to come up with your own original riddle, I give them marks for that. Yeah. Now, water was a better answer, but still, it is hard. So, I mean, if you've ever tried to craft one.
Oh, water would be a good answer.
Yeah,
water does bring both pleasure and pain. Mm-hmm. It's oftentimes taken for granted until it's gone.
Mm-hmm. So, same with children.
Yeah.
So I think
virginity,
children, water. I think there are answers that work. Hair doesn't work. I mean, okay, I guess I don't know. Maybe unless you've been like somebody being hung by like a horsehair rope. Who's ever been hurt by hair?
Okay.
Maybe he shaves poorly and gets ingrown hairs.
Those are painful, but also, like, your hair gets stuck on stuff and it hurts. If you've ever slammed your hair in a car door...
But then it's the car door, so maybe the car door is the answer.
There you go.
Because the car door could also slam a finger or a toe.
That's true.
I mean, any number of things.
This could be a personal
maybe
thing.
Maybe the musical.
Well, could be, but
musical hair?
Yes.
No, it's never been called.
He could just be a very hirsute kind of guy, and so he's embarrassed by the fact that every time he takes his shirt off, it looks like he's wearing a rug. So it could hurt him, emotionally.
Maybe he means my brother's like that. He jumps into a swimming pool,
right?
Yeah, maybe he means a toupee,
and children run and flee. Yeah,
yeah, and the rest of us just hit hard concrete, and wring himself out. So yeah, I get that. Okay, I'm Ollie. I'm terribly sorry, and I'm glad you stuck with the hobby.
Yeah, me too.
That's all I can say.
I'm always amazed when I hear these stories. I'm like, thank you for staying with us. It's worth it.
I don't know how you're still a role player, but I'm glad you are.
Exactly.
Glad you found something better. Because
last time you guys were on, I shared the worst story we'd ever heard. It came across on our thing, and I'm astonished that those people are still playing and it was truly horrifying. And
the Donald ducking incident.
Yeah, the Donald ducking incident, and that's putting it mildly. And it was all of these horror stories. I enjoy them because we all learn from that journey, and a lot of us can go, yeah, God, I was in oh my God, and we can commiserate. Misery loves company.
I don't know if enjoy is the right word.
I can't. Okay, some of these are like, okay, they're cringe games, and most people when they're younger they have some cringe games,
Yeah.
and they mature and they learn better storytelling and they develop socially and get past it. And with those I can commiserate, but the ones like the dude that just started spanking on stream. I mean, I'm sorry, I have no frame of reference.
No, none of us did. None of us did.
The chat room was.
Chris's-
Sorry, go ahead.
Players showing off their nuts to each other. I've got no frame of reference there.
No. Chris, the chat room was asking earlier, how old were you with the when you did the game where there was the rape incident?
Yeah, that happened. I want to say that was late '90s, I think.
Okay.
So, because it was, I think that was pre third edition.
73, 74.
Hey, he called you
it
old.
was, that would have put me. That would have put me late 20s, early 30s, most likely. That was the thing, and I even answered. It was
Kind of old for that. I would expect that in somebody's teens.
You see, and that was the thing, is that type of juvenile BS that we would have, that you would have in your games when you were those ages, that was long gone. It just, that kind of stuff didn't.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen, So that made it even weirder.
Yeah, totally. Interesting.
So, yeah.
All right, I think that's
All
a
right.
lid.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you guys for coming in.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Very much appreciated.
Well, once again, thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's always good to talk to you, and we really need to get a whole podcast about podcasting with you guys and how the thing has
Thanks.
changed. Because that's actually, we could talk for hours on that, all of us.
Oh, I could. Yeah, shoot me an email. Let's get this going.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
All start a new podcast about podcasting because that's what we all need to do.
Is less
Have
free
another
time.
podcast.
We'll
Yeah.
make an AP out of it.
There we go.
We'll make an actual play about actual.
Well,
Yeah.
that's so meta. So meta. I love it. All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right, here we go.
Oh, the Russian national anthem.
Thank you for joining us for Season 22, Episode 1 of Happy Checks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
To jest Storkes.
And who are you guys?
Dan?
And Chris.
And thank you, Dan and Chris from Fear the Boot.
Yeah,
And
Thanks,
we should
guys.
do this again sometime.
absolutely.
Games coming up. We have games on Saturday, we have games on Sunday, and we have games on Monday.
Yep, and so
games on
this
Wednesday.
weekend is the con, so we're doing the live from the con.
Tomorrow, 8
Tomorrow.
p.m. Pacific time.
Yep, so.
Thank you
should
very
be
much.
fun.
We'll leave with a song.
Dungeons and Dragons, hero pathfinder, fatal savage worlds, evil plots will be usurping, though we could do with less burping. Happy Jack's podcast will be douchebag Bacchus must now his crown resign. I am the only god of wine, the only god of wine. 'Tis not fit that red should be. Tis not fit that red in competition who can drink more? Who can drink more? Drink 10 times more than he. Can drink 10 times more than he. Who can drink 10 times more? Drink 10 times, drink more than he. Make a new world. Make a new powers divine. Make a else but one. A new world. Powers divine. A world. Make a new world. Not with else but now but wine. Make a new world. Ye powers divine. With nothing else but wine. A new world. Stuck with nothing else but wine. Let wine be earth and air. 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 Let wine and let that wine be all for me. And let that wine be all for me.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.